Hello everybody, hope you're doing marvellously well. I'm feeling rather blessed because I'm sitting with Mr. Jack Joseph Puig. How are you?
Doing just fine, thank you.
Marvelous.
Very, very happy to be here. And thank you for coming by and spending this time with me.
This has been a lot of fun so far. We've obviously been chatting a lot off cameras, which is pretty amazing. First quick dumb question is, what do you call your studio?
PuigChild Studio.
Ah, that makes perfect sense.
Yep, after the PuigChild.
Which I've used about 20,000 times, along with many other people.
Yeah, it took us a year. It took 1 year to complete that. In other words, they gave it to me finished.
Yeah.
And I listened to it, and I was like, it's too perfect. And as you very well know, a lot of the old gear is not perfect. That's what we like about it. The fact that it's got character. So I had them send me what they call the lab version, which has all the different little controls of the circuitry, right? And you could alter those in terms of how much second harmonic or third harmonic distortion or the feedback loops, all the actual design of the electronics.
Wow.
And I worked on it for 1 year, including like making sure it had the right hum in it, because they all have a hum. They had it perfect. There was no hum, no buzz. I was like, no, it has a hum. It needs to be like that. So it took a year of playing with it to get it to where like, okay, that is what it sounds like. The other thing that was interesting is that, I don't know if you've had this experience, but most of the time you'll find that the B-side sounds better than the A-side. I don't know why. No one has the answer. I've asked it a billion times. But I've noticed that fairly consistently. And so I wanted to make sure we were using the B-side, so we had to redo some things to model it after the B-side. I spent a year, literally a year, playing with it until I was like, okay, that feels like a Fairchild. And then we called it PuigChild.
I spoke to Andrew Sheps about his plugin, and he had a similar process. I know that's not everybody. Not everybody puts that kind of detail in, so it's amazing to hear you did. And it shows because we do use it a lot. I
would like to make sure I say that the one thing I really like about what you're doing is, and we spoke about this off camera, is finding that balance. So one concern I have is that there's so much information out there. And if when I try to imagine if I was coming up today, like just brand new, right? And I'm looking at all these videos, massive amount of videos, massive amount of shows, massive, just crazy amount of information. Some of it is not in lockstep, and some of it is not accurate. So essentially what I'm talking about is people growing up in what I call the preset generation, not really having an understanding of why. Why do you do this? Not even asking the question, why is it done like this? Or why have people done it this way? Or why is the best way to do this for the future, or what I'm doing now? Why? The question, why? And you get to the bottom of that a lot.
Well, thank you, I appreciate it.
And that's extremely, extremely, extremely important.
Well, I think we were talking about this off camera. I mean, one of the problems is that problems is a strong word. One of the realities is it's easier to reinforce stereotypes.
Right.
And almost like, you know, safety in numbers, you can get higher views on your stuff if you just go, yeah, this sucks, this is great. And nothing amazing came from that, you know.
Right.
You've said several times in this interview of us talking earlier and in other things, you know, you've recognized that the randomness, the mistakes, the wrongness, the creativity that just comes from out of nothing, you know, you're highlighting that as being really super important as to what makes true greatness. And I think that if we just stick to stereotypes of, you know, black and white answers to every question, none of that exists.
I call it catching the butterfly. You know, you go and the butterfly's sometimes not there. But when the butterfly is there, you got to capture the butterfly, right? So it's really just recognizing, okay, this is right, we're on the right thing. How do I capture it? How do I problem solve? How do I bring this to the forefront? And that's really what we're talking about, essentially, is catching the butterfly, the magic. You know, the innovation of it all, the creativity of it all, the wonderment of it all, right? Like the wonderment. Like, How do we get that? What is it going to be? How are people going to feel about it? That's exciting to me.
What are you mixing at the moment?
3 different artists, one of which is, I've done very little country music. And one of the ones I'm working on right now is Darlene Hurst, country.
Right.
We put the single out, the first single, entered at 42,
Nice.
jumped to 14 the next week, number 2 the next week, number 1 the following week. So in 4 weeks, boom, 1, which is fast for country. And then it went down to 2, and then went back to 1. And that's when I told the label, okay, put the gasoline on. If you go from 1 to 2 and then back to 1, people are voting. Yes. Pour the gasoline, cross it to pop. I actually think the hardest record to make, in my opinion, is the pop country record. And the reason why I think that's the hardest record to make is it's opposed to what it really should be. What I mean by that is rock and roll, rap, and country are the same thing. Social commentary, emotional commentary, real. Hip hop and pop come and go. They're not really real. You know, they're more just kind of storytelling and they're fantasy and all of that. But if you think about rap, that's real. They're talking about what's happening in the street. Rock and roll is like, no, there's a man over there who tells me I have to go take this gun and go kill people. I don't want to do that. Buffalo Springfield. That's rock and roll, right? Essentially, old rock and roll, of course. And then country's the same thing. It's supposed to be real, about your real life, the real story of what's going on in your life, right? So if you think about a pop country record, it's like, well, how do you do that? Because pop is fantasy and country is real. So how do you make that record? They're kind of just opposed. This is the hardest record to make. And so I admire some of these country artists that can make a record that crosses over, because it's really hard. Pop records are thought through. You know, when you make pop records, it's the architecture of the record is really thought through. How long is the turnaround? Is it a 2/4 bar turnaround? Is it a 4/4? Do you repeat it twice? Should you even do that? Should you start with the chorus? You know, how long is the chorus? Is it a half chorus? Is it vocals you flew from somewhere else? Or like, what is the architecture? How do I grab somebody's attention in 1 second and keep it through 3 minutes and 10 seconds or 2 minutes and 40 seconds, whatever the song is? How do I do that? How do I write glitter, the right magic dust? Rock and roll is like, not that. It's pelvic energy. It's sexy, it's fun. Like, go for it. Bashy. Pop is clean, orchestrated, thought through, organized. You actually have to know how to make records to make a pop record. You actually have to know how to make a record. Because it's smart, it's thought through. It's not an accident.
Even just genre-wise, trying to get some of that grit and dirt from country, something that feels authentic, and marry it with pop.
That's hard.
Yeah, makes perfect sense.
It's really hard. So to me, it's the hardest one to make, but fun.
So I want to know your journey. Where were you born?
So I was born in Connecticut. All I really know is California. Came out at a very young age. Always loved music. Always was fascinated with every aspect of it. Everything to do with it. At the same time, I loved technology as well and had a great understanding of it. My father was a television repairman. So growing up through school, to earn my first car, I would work at my father's television repair shop on stereos and radios and things of that sort. So I had a fairly good understanding of technology from that perspective, like real understanding of designing circuits and things of that sort. But my passion really was music and record making. Then joined a band, was a bass player, played around town in bass. One day we went to a studio and there was an error, a problem. I went into the control room, naturally solved it and realized I'm on the wrong side of the glass. Like, I'm never gonna be an unbelievable bass player. I'll be okay. maybe good, I don't know, but not phenomenal. And I want to be really good at whatever it is that I do, right? So I switched to the other side of the glass. Became very fortunate to meet a guy named Toby Foster who introduced me to a guy named Bill Schnee. Bill Schnee was, or is, one of the classic 70 engineers. Tons of 70s records. Huge hits he made with a guy named Richard Perry. And they were a very, very successful team. Many, many, many hit records. So I got a good understanding of the 70s approach. But then I wanted to really understand the 60s, and I had the good fortune of Glenn Johns, who admired Bill Schnee. Well, if you're Bill Schnee's protege, come work with me. So I made 9 albums with Glenn Johns, heard a lot of stories, saw a lot of things, learned a tremendous amount.
What records did you make with him?
John Hyatt records.
Oh, amazing. Do you remember which records?
Stolen Moments comes to mind. I think that's the right title.
Who else was playing? Was Jim Keltner playing with him? And...
Yes, with Jim Keltner, some of the best musicians ever. Mm-hmm. In fact, one of the most amazing moments in working with Glenn Johns, and I've told this before, but I think it's a fun thing to talk about. I really wanted to impress him. in the worst way. It's Glenn Johns. In some ways, kind of like the Yoda, the first one in the lineage of all of us, sort of. You know, he was the first freelance. He was the first a lot of firsts. Just because it was happening, he was there.
And he had a connection going back to the Beatles, so.
Led Zeppelin.
Yep.
All the way back.
Yep.
Humble Pie, I mean, all these bands, I mean, you name it.
Eagles.
And that's a great story as well. But the one I have in mind is that I wanted to impress him. I very, very carefully wanted to get the best guitar sound I could get on John Hyatt. So I did what we do. We've all done this. Put on the headphones, take the microphone, move it around the speaker. You know, move it around going, how much buzz, how much low end do I want? How bright do I want it to be? And just 30 minutes of just messing with that microphone. Like, oh, okay, that's it. Go in the control room, he's standing there. Very blue blood. Everyone's standing there. Okay, John, let's hear it. John hits it. It's like, wow, what a great guitar sound. I was like, kind of know what I'm doing. He goes, I want to teach all you guys a lesson. What do you mean? Everyone follow me. Okay. So we go out into the studio. He looks at the microphone, looks at me, looks at everybody in the band, takes his foot, boom, knocks it over. Rock and roll is not precious. It's not technical. I want you to grab the microphone right now without thinking about it. And I want you to just put it there. I want you to use your instinct of where it makes the most sense. And I did it. And it was good. Fast forward 6 months later, I'm at a dinner table, head of Fender, head of Gibson, and a guy named Harvey from a company called Rainbow Guitars. And Harvey and I started talking. Harvey goes, man, I had the most amazing experience. I go, what's that? He goes, I got to go to an Emmylou Harris session in Arizona, and Glenn Johns was producing. Oh, cool. Because I saw the most amazing thing. I go, what's that? He goes, well, had these headphones on, and he was smoothing the microphone on the speaker. I was like, whoa, slow down. Tell me that again. What happened? So I called Glenn. He was in Nashville. Said everything I just said to him, and he goes, I never said I didn't learn anything from you. So it was a full circle lesson.
Yeah.
Of not being precious, using instinct, but at the same time using intellect when it makes sense.
Sure.
So if we're really great at what we do, we balance intellect and instinct, the right and the left part of our brain. We sit on top of it, we manage it. We make them get along with each other. They don't like each other. Or the instinct thinks it's got another level, it's the third eye. It's this unquantifiable thing. The intellect goes, no, I know how it works. I'm really smart. You want to play chess? I'll beat you. Right? Neither one are right. It's So I've spent the last 8 years, of always paying attention to my instinct in real life. So if I'm walking and I see a penny and it goes, oh, you should pick up that penny, I pick up the penny. If my instinct says, don't put that there, that glass of coffee is not going to fall. It's like it's holding on the ledge. If that falls, it goes into gear, this could blow up, and that's on the vocal, and you don't have the mix. So it's like, just don't do it. That's going to be fine. I turn like this, my elbow catches it, boom, and what do? You know what? I had a feeling. I knew this was going to happen. You didn't listen to your instinct. Mm-hmm. If you don't listen to your instinct, it will go away. You have to empower the instinct and pay attention to it. It's the most powerful. At the same time, you need to bounce to the intellect to solve what the instinct identifies. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And that's what I'm trying to master, is being able to go back and forth. This is a 15-year journey that I'm trying to master. But the only way I can do it is if I empower that instinct. And that really all came out of the lesson with Glenn when he did exactly what he told me I wasn't supposed to do. But I missed the lesson because he was just trying to teach me to not be precious. He was right. Even though I thought he was being like difficult and trying to show off. I'm like, why do you kick the microphone? He saw me spend 30 minutes on it. He was teaching me a really valuable lesson that put me on this 15-year path.
Makes perfect sense.
Invaluable lesson.
What I also love about that story is knowing when to do those things in the session. What I mean by that is having many skill sets, knowing that you want to keep the momentum going. So you're like, this is going to work 99 times out of 100, so I'm going to do that just so we can keep tracking.
Yes.
And then the other version of like where you need to add a 30-minute break.
Yes. I have made up things to get that break. Hey, this is not working right. Let's just take a break for a second. Set up this microphone, do this, do that. Let me know when you got it. They have no idea. Yeah. But I had to do that because nobody wants to stop for the tick, you know. Okay, we've been working 8 hours on the snare drum sound. Not good. Mm-hmm. You just killed the session. But sometimes you want to have that ability to do that, creativity. So it's like finding ways to do it. Yeah. In my opinion.
Oh no, absolutely. Makes perfect sense. How many times have you listened to the demo and been like, oh, it has everything I need, you know, but sonically it's not as good as I want it to be, but maybe I'm better off using the demo. I
had this with the Rolling Stones. I will never forget it. I took a big chance. I had mixed a couple songs, and Jagger threw me the DVD. He said, okay, this is the next song you're mixing, and here's a CD of the demo. And he left. And I turned to my assistant, said, pop in the CD. He goes, why? I said, that's code that he thinks the demo is better. Why did he give me the demo and none of the demos on the other songs? Mm-hmm. He thinks that's better, but he can't say it. Mm-hmm. Turns out it's a kitchen demo. He's playing the guitar. It's him singing. It's a drum machine. And it's magic. It's like, whoa. Like, that sounds like Jagger when he was 17. It's fantastic, right? Play the Stones version? No. So I thought, okay, he wants me to be the guy that steals things from the demo, but he can't tell Charlie that he wants to take Charlie's drums and also add the drum machine to it. He can't tell Keith that he likes his rhythm acoustic guitar. So someone else has to do it. And I did that. So I did that whole thing, got away with it, which gave me a certain kind of level of confidence. Put up the next song, and I'm like, this thing needs a tambourine or a shaker. It just needs some. So I did it. And everybody in the studio was like, dude, you can't do that. What are you doing? I said, well, it's Friday night. It's 10 o'clock at night. They're coming in the morning. If I don't do it, it's not going to get done. So I did it. And Jagger came in. They're all sitting there listening. And I'm thinking, I think I got away with it. No one said anything. Go to mix the next song. Jagger comes in with a DVD, throws it to me, goes, there's a track of maracas, a track of tambourine, and a track of shaker. You decide which one do you want, okay? And walked out. So I didn't really get away with it. Kind of did, and I kind of didn't. But there was a lesson there, of having the guts, taking that step, giving the confidence in them that I would actually do that means, okay, this is rock and roll. This guy's got guts. Let's follow him. That's the real lesson in that.
Yeah. Well, that's what you hope for, isn't it? You hope for a proper working relationship where you're pushing each other.
These to me are some of the things that I want the preset generation to hear and learn. I don't want to tell the preset generation, you put 1176 on the guitar. Really? Oh, I never thought of that. And by the way, use a 1073 on the voice and a Telefunken 251 microphone and a Fairchild or an LE2. Oh my God, I would have never done that. You're a genius. No, that's a genius. It doesn't, you know what I mean? It's not genius. And so I want the preset generation to understand that. At the same time, I want them to understand the other element, meaning how many interviews have you seen with very successful people who say, it's not about the gear. That's emotion. You got to get that feeling and you got to get the emotion. And I watching the video and I'm thinking to myself, so why is there $1 million of equipment around you right now? If it doesn't matter, turn all the equipment off. I want it all off. Get out your laptop. Don't tell me the gear doesn't matter. But meanwhile, there's a wall of gear behind you. It's a lie.
I think for me,
there's a marriage between the two.
Exactly. There's a marriage between it.
Including, let me say one last thing, then I want to hear what you would say, including the confidence it might give you because there's a wall of gear behind you.
I agree. For me, my message is don't let the lack of gear stop you from making music. Because that's the only thing. I get emails from people saying they get paralyzed because they go onto a forum, like some of the big forums, and they ask a question, an innocent question, because they want to know what to buy. And they get 100 people telling them unless they have X, Y, and Z, they can't make music. I think, so to me, it's like I want to encourage the people to get going, like get making music. If you've only got a 4-track cassette or you've only got a iPhone or whatever it might be, an Android, if you're going to record that idea, just record that idea. Don't stop recording the idea because you don't have X, Y, and Z pieces of equipment. But I know what you mean, because I remember Brian Kohlstrom, God rest his soul, telling me about making the Dirt record with Dave Jordan, which is a wonderful record. And he said to me it was like a watershed moment for him. And I was like, why? He goes, because I finally got to use like really nice equipment. And I realized that all of the knowledge I had was great. But as soon as I put the right mic, a beautiful mic in a beautiful in the right place, suddenly it was like, oh, I'm now a better engineer. So there is that sort of reality as well, you know.
Well, the same dinner table I told you about that I was sitting with, the situation I explained about Glenn.
Yeah.
In that same conversation, one of the guys that was on that table was talking about Billy from ZZ Top, had done an interview. And they asked him how he got this guitar sound on a certain song. And he lied.
Right.
He made a big elaborate thing. And then we put this microphone up in the air and we ran into this snare drum and we did this and we did that. And it was like a really complicated thing, right? Like massive, complicated thing. Yeah. Years later, he's doing a guitar interview. And a guy walks in the room and says, I did exactly what you said. And he showed the picture of how he hung the microphones, everything that Billy made up. And he said it crushed him because all it was a tweed amp with a 57 in front of it. He made it up.
Yeah.
And yet this guy went out and tried to duplicate it. It took him 4 days and it crushed him. And he realized, I should have done that. I shouldn't have lied.
Yeah.
So the truth of the simplicity, just a 57 on a guitar amp. Or elaborate as you're talking about, they both work.
Yeah.
I think technology is extremely important, but I think the lack of it is extremely important. It's all important. It's art. You can't put it in a bottle. It's chemistry. It just works sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, and you go, oh wow, I got this amazing vocal sound. Everyone's talking about how much they love the mix. And so you go back to the section and look at it. Okay, I use this plugin, this plugin, this plugin, and this plugin. Okay, copy that, put that in my template. I just discovered like the vocal sound.
Yeah.
Next song, boom, pull template out, like, oh, why? Wait, it's too bright, too dark, too this. Oh, it's sibilant. Wait, but Ludwig told me, Grumman told me, so-and-so told me, it was the best thing they ever heard in their life. Like,
was the singer on that day in that room,
all
that
those things.
performance? Yeah.
So the whole template thing, the preset generation, all of that, I understand it. And as you said a moment ago, gets you from 0 to 100 quickly.
Yeah.
This is important. But then it goes back to what we said earlier, the accident factor.
Yeah.
The fact that my finger slipped and it went to sound toys instead of waves, and I pulled up the wrong delay. But it was like, well, what is that? All this is important. Let God in the room.
I love that, yeah.
Let God in the room, as Quincy Jones says. Let him in the room.
Well, he said he got that from Stevie Wonder.
Where he got it, let him in the room.
Yeah.
Great advice by Quincy Jones / Stevie Wonder.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, he said that Stevie always leaves enough room in the room for God, meaning no ego whatsoever, which makes perfect sense. So much. This makes me touch on so many things. I still want to know more about your journey.
I just realized I sidetracked, didn't I?
No. You and I, we share that, which is
just
wonderful.
Like talking.
So you got Glyn Johns,
and then Arif Mardin, a Melissa Manchester record was the first thing I did with him. That's where I learned how to deal with people in the studio. He was absolutely amazing at that. We were recording a Barbra Streisand song I did with him. It was a big hit for us. And I remember doing the string session, and Barbara was singing along, and she said, something's out of tune, something's not right. Oh, we all looked at each other at the control room like, there's nothing wrong, right? Yes, Barbara. Hits a talk back. Let me hear the strings. Bars 68 to 42, or 68 to 100, let's say. Mm-hmm. They play. Cellos only. They play. First chair, cello only. They play. Joe, you're a little out of tune. Guy's not out of tune. Let me hear that again. You're a little sharp. Play it again. Okay, that's good. Okay, Barbara, we got it. She goes, thank you, Arif. There was nothing wrong. He went through that whole thing and nothing was wrong, but he knew how to deal with people. Mm-hmm. He knew how to talk to them. You know, Al Schmidt has a reputation for that, as being fabulous. Musician, as he says, musician is your friend. Knowing how to talk and be with them and give them the confidence. These guys were really, really good at that. And then what I also learned from him is actually arrangement. So what I wanted to learn from him in particular, him being Arif, is structure of songs and arrangements. He taught me that bass is everything in terms of how it relates to the chords. And that put me on the path of understanding, like, okay, so the way it works is I can play 1, 3, 5, but where I put this defines what that chord sounds like. So once I get that relationship right, the bass note to the chord, now the melody that sits on top of that chord is empowered. Because now I have every one of those relationships, like THX, boom. Now the lyrics come to life. But it starts at the root, at that bass. Once I get those intervals right, it's magic. And if you listen to really great records, a lot of really great records, for the test of time, they have a great bass line. You'll be like, oh, he's right. Frankie Goes to Hollywood, bow, bow, bow. Mm-hmm. Underneath the Boardwalk. Mm-hmm. I can keep going. Great bass lines that empower the chord, that empower the melody, that empower the lyric. That's how, to me, how it works. Just my opinion. But I got set on that from Arif, because Arif would spend tons of time finding those intervals to empower Aretha or the Bee Gees, records that he made before my time. but they're all great records. And that's something he taught me. So I learned about arrangement from him. I learned about the bashiness, the excitement, everything that the 60s were from Glenn, not being precious. And from Schnee, I learned the art of microphones, 2 microphones, where things go. He came from R&B. So the relationship between the beat and the bass. So I got to learn about each decade on my way to trying to be the Kissinger, even in that element of it. So I understand how those records work now. Now I understand those 80s records that to me are still the sexiest decade. Thompson Twins, I can't think of them all. All those sexy, croony records that were sexy, you know? They just were in the 80s to me. And then learning from Bill, I got to learn, well, why were pads put in microphones? Because multitrack recording came. And you had to have it all separate. So that meant you put the microphone close on something. So you get to learn about why things were done the way they were done so you can abuse them and create with them and know what the boundaries are. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So I learned from those 3 decades, and then I went off, and I still say that there are a lot of people that are very, very talented, that by far more talented than I am, that have not succeeded because they just weren't at the right place at the right time for whatever reason. So for us that have great success, we should be very thankful, really thankful that we had the opportunity. Now, again, given to us at birth, but we could have done nothing with it. We studied, we were ready. Put me in the game, I know how to hit a spitball. He can throw a curveball, ain't gonna be a problem. I know exactly how to hit that thing. Because you studied, because you cared, because you listened to records for hours. For me, growing up, there wasn't a Bob Claremont record I wasn't gonna buy. And I was gonna sit between those 2 speakers and I was gonna listen to it like, how is he doing that? Why is he doing that? What can I learn? Because there's no magazine I can read. There's no video. I have to figure it out. So that when I get the opportunity, I can nail it.
What did you think when you first heard Avalon?
Lost my mind. Avalon, Big Bam Boom, Crowded House.
Mm-hmm.
When I was making the Jellyfish records, Crowded House sat in the cassette player, never left, and I was constantly listening to it and going and comparing to it. He did one of the most important things, and I think I should give a little bit of credit to Hugh Padgham as well, in that both those guys created a sound. Yep. They took the SSL console, the technology of the SSL console, and they created what I call implied power. What I mean by that is some of the 70s records was real power. I mean, they actually, the speaker is coming out of its cone, trying to push the low frequency, like pushing, air. They made records more where the compression and the gating in the mid-range equalization made your brain think it's big, but it's not really big like a 70s record. It's big in a different way. So it's real power and implied power. They created a whole sound that many of us have copied or attempted to. That's a notch on your belt. You can copy anyone's record. You can be the guy that made the second Pearl Jam record, or the third Pearl Jam record, or the second or third whatever. But who made the template? Who's the one that made that first one that created the template for that artist? That's the real thing. That's the real goal. When you can do that, that's a notch on your belt, in my opinion.
No, I agree.
And that's the goal.
Yeah, I agree. My old manager from years ago, Sandy Robertson, I'm sure you know Sandy, he would always be like, it's all about cracking the code. Can you crack the code? And I like that.
Yeah. It is cracking the code.
Yeah. How did you start going out on your own? What was that journey?
Nerve-wracking, frankly. I had a job at a studio called Whitney's that was in Glendale. From there, I went to a place called Martin Sound that was in Alhambra, and that was primarily Christian records. And I felt like they were always copying, and I wanted to be one of those persons that could make. So I wanted to get out of that world and more into like making records in the, I guess, the heathen world, for like a better description. that were just like making records. They didn't know where they were going. They were influenced, but they were taking chances, and I wanted to get in that. So I left Martin Sound, and luckily Bill Schnee helped me, and then working with Glenn helped me. And then it just, as my mentor said to me, one thing leads to another. And you're always on the job interview. You're always on the job interview. And one thing leads to another. And it's more important to be ready for the opportunity than the opportunity. Nothing is more devastating. They put you in a game and you can't hit the ball. That's devastating. So I took the chance. I spent a lot of time, learned my craft, and one thing just left to another. So I did this record, then this person wanted that. Oh, then that person wanted. And it just kept going. And I've been very, very fortunate to additionally be able to work on some records that people thought were really great records. Yes, I was a part of it, but again, I'm not the rock star. They wrote the song, and God smiled upon us, and things just went right. And you end up having one thing leading to another. It's really the journey, and when I look back, I still like the journey. The arriving was great, but then, so what? It's, can I do it? The magic of it all. The fun part of it, you know, the competition, the healthy competition. This is the fun part, to me.
Isn't without sounding fatalistic, what do they say? Life is a journey, the only destination is death. So
it's true.
We should always be learning and enjoying the journey as we go. Yeah,
it's true.
Yeah. So I do want to know though, because obviously Jellyfish, for me in England, the Jellyfish records, both those records were hugely important to us in the music community. When they came out, they're almost a validation of what we all loved.
Yes.
You know, because here was a band that was obviously wearing all the obvious things like the Beatles, etc., on their sleeve, but we also heard 10cc and we heard Supertramp. And that's what we sort of gravitated toward, especially at that period of the very late 80s and early 90s, where it was not hip at all to be into anything like that. Everything was very produced, and, you know, records had snares triggering gunshots and, you know, yes, and everything. And then this band comes out that obviously has a massive nod to all of the classic records, you know, made all the way through 50s, 60s, and 70s. Firstly, how did you get the gig? How did you get involved? What was the, you know?
The thing that happens in this business is you get a reputation. Right or wrong, you get a reputation. And because I grew up underneath, in particular, Bill Schnee, a guy named Doug Sachs from the Mastering Lab, people who we would listen to everything, down to, is it an ever-ready battery? Or is it a Duracell battery? Like, which battery sounds best in this pedal? The battery. Oh, if I put the patch cord in this way, it sounds one way, but if I take the same patch cord and reverse it, wait, well, why would it sound different? But it does. Okay, put a red on that side. We know that's the output. Put a blue, that's the input. Guitar chords, solid wire versus stranded wire, silver, gold contacts, on and on and on. And so I was always chasing tone from the very beginning, because my mentor, Bill Schnee, was always chasing tone. He grew up in an era where not everybody had the same recording console. Not everyone had an SSL, a pair of NS10s, two 1073s, 4 reverbs. In other words, is that studio in New York, Los Angeles, Nashville, or the strip mall on Van Nuys Boulevard? It's all the same. If you go inside the room, you don't know what city you're in. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to chase tone. And so I wanted to find out which things can get the best tone for me, right? And I developed that reputation as someone who really cared about sound and audio and wanted to understand it and wanted to be really great. So Albie Galutin, who was the producer, one of the producers, on all those successful Bee Gees records, all those records that they were making, hired me to do a Kenny Loggins song, actually. And he saw my talent, and I had a lot of people who said very good things about me. And they knew I was Bill Schneider's protege. They knew that Glenn Johns thought I was very talented. They knew that Elliot Scheidner thought I was very talented. And the list goes on. George Massenburg, Doug Sachs, and these were like people that were very respected at the time. So he took a chance on me. And we made this Jellyfish record. And I did all of that. Special microphones, cords, wires underneath the door, straight into this, straight into that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What valves were in the amplifiers? Listen to the different valves, pick the right tube for the input. Listen to 5 different 12AX7s to make sure that's the best sounding one. Every detail was spent. Every 10 reels of 2-inch tape. That one doesn't align as good, throw it out. Another reel of tape. Okay, that's holding the tones great. We're gonna record on that. On and on to make those records be what they are.
And it was a perfect storm because you had insanely talented musicians.
Yes.
That all could play their instruments
Absolutely.
to the next level. They all loved the greatest records ever made. So it was like a perfect storm. You got to work with people that could elevate themselves as well.
I learned a valuable lesson there too, because one day we set up tons of keyboards out in the studio, and it was everything you could imagine. Harpsichords, synthesizers, whatever. And they were doing that because we were visited that day by one of their idols, which was Wilson, right, from the Beach Boys. And he came in, it was very interesting, I'll never forget this. He was kind of quiet, the way we kind of think of him, like something not right. And like, look at this, and look at this, and look at this, we want to show you this. And they showed him everything. He's not saying anything. He's kind of quiet. I'm watching him. What's going on? So he walks into the control room, and I follow him. And it's just him and I alone. He looked at me with perfect awareness, perfect everything, and said, I came here today thinking these kids were going to show me something. I already did all this. I already used a harpsichord. I already used a clavinet. I've done all this. They're not teaching me anything. And then door opened, it was the band, and he went back into being quiet. That was a moment I'll never forget. There was nothing wrong with him. It was clear as a bell when he looked at me.
What did you take away from that?
What I took away from that is that this whole idea of retro is baloney. What I took away from that, again, putting me on the same path of each decade has something that's beautiful about it. And it's a matter of understanding that all art is a synthesis of the art that's prior to it. And so this idea that, oh, you can only this is cool, and only this microphone or this piano or how we used to do it, it's like, no, that was then. This is now. We can take from that. But why would we not use all the things? Why would we not want to have this plugin or this compressor or this limiter or this instrument or this way of making records or admiring this producer or this arranger who did this or did that or this record? We do all that to create the future. It's a synthesis of the past. That's the future. We're not reinventing the wheel. Still a wheel. Cars still have a wheel on them. How many years has there been a wheel?
What did you directly, after that moment, because if Brian Wilson had said something like that to me, I'm sure it would have been earth-shattering. So how did you take that information during the session?
I then thought I need to push everybody to not trying to look at, let's mimic those things, but to be influenced by those things and create something different.
Well, that's great, because that's how the records come across, both those albums.
So it's like, okay, well, if we're going to use a Wurlitzer, why don't we hook up 2 Wurlitzers? We'll tape the pedal together. One Wurlitzer will be in the left speaker. One Wurlitzer will be in the right speaker. We'll use a tube one for the left side, because that's going to be your left hand. And they got better bass. and we'll use the right one, which is solid state, so the chords sound great. So were we influenced by how cool Ghostbusters were then? Absolutely. But we took it to another level. We take two together. We didn't just take one, the mono one, and put a chorus on it. We figured out another way to make true stereo, but take the advantage of different kinds. That's smart. I mean, that sounds egocentric. I don't mean it that way.
No, I understand.
But I mean smart thinking, like being creative.
Yep.
So when Brian acted that way, I thought, okay, he's right. How do we take this to the next level? So let's set up timpanis and make the timpanis be part of the tom-tom fill. Why is it just to be tom-toms? Let's do this, let's do that, and the list goes on. You know, we were very, very calculated. At that point, I started thinking about how to do things differently. And it was fun. And that really began the beginning of me recording with speakers. So I never thought about recording with speakers. And I thought, well, speakers are microphone backwards. So I started collecting speakers. I have a whole collection of all different kinds of speakers. And I started using those microphones. And I got sounds that you could never get with a microphone, just from a geometry standpoint. You know, putting a speaker on a bass amp and adding that to the microphone and then bring that in. Like, you can't get that out of a microphone. So Brian kind of pushed me to thinking, all right, there are no rules. They've already done all that. We don't want to do the same thing. Do I think a Red 17, Red 37 console is cool? Yeah. But there's other stuff that's cool too. So don't get stuck in that, because that was kind of the road it was going initially. And I think that's part of the reason why those records sound the way they do, because I wanted the impact I said earlier about the implied thing that Bob and Hugh were doing at the time. But I also wanted that tone those Elton John records had, or some of those older records that were like, because they were 70s, they were warm and they were fat and they were thick. But then I wanted that bashy fun thing that the 60s had, innocence, the garage element, the bright, bashy, smashy thing. And I wanted to put all those decades together to make what I thought was the best of every world I could get. And it's always been the path I've been on. You know, this room we're sitting in is hot rodded. Every cable is thought through. Everything is listened to. It's hot rodded to get the best, what I think is the best tone. I've come to understand that you know, we talk about all the time that music is a universal language. As dumb as this sounds, the dogs are not here on purpose because I didn't want them to interrupt us. But I have 2 Malteses and a Labradoodle. The female Maltese has ears, unbelievable ears. She has unbelievable ears. What I've noticed about her is that I could say, her name is Sparkleheart. I could say, Sparkleheart, come. Might come, might not come. Sparkleheart. But if I go, baby little girly girl, your daddy's little baby Sparkleheart. So what did I learn there? That it's not the language, it's the tone. What we do, and why the tone matters, everything I just said, is because the tone is the carrier. Everything sits on top of the tone. The tone in sound only matters because it's a conduit between your heart and my heart. And how big that conduit is how much we connect. Only reason why 32 or 16 or 8-bit matter, right?
Sure.
Not high definition resolution, doesn't mean anything. But the tone matters because you and I could be in a village in Egypt and we could say, blah, 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 blah. The guy doesn't know what we just said, but he knows we're mad. The tone is what matters. And whether it's subtraction EQ or not subtraction EQ, we can argue about all that. The harmonic distortion that's created, the phase issues are created when you add opposed to subtraction. You know, we can have all these deep conversations. At the end of the day, how do I get there? How does it make me feel? But it's not just about feeling. It's understanding these things that make you get there. You have to have the balance. creating the tone that empowers the message, because it's social and emotional commentary. That's all it is. We're the guy in the middle. Do we screw that up? Or are we the conduit? Understanding all these things, tone, art, technology. It's a big deal.
Absolutely. It's quite a thing to navigate.
Yeah. And effortlessly. With no one knowing that you're doing it. No one knows you're doing it. They just think it's going on. Everyone's laughing, smoking cigarettes, hanging out, drinking coffee, talking about this, and the whole time you're like, yeah, I know exactly that's going on. I'm watching them. Are their foot tapping in time, not tapping in time? Where are people in the room? Who is more important than the other one? Who understands this? Should I put a 251 versus a 47? What compressor's on there? How loud should it be? Should it be in the left speaker or the right speaker? Is this the right song? Does the song matter? Should I take them off this? Should I save the song for the next record? The amount of things that you have to take into account is astronomical. And that's why you need a Kissinger template, so that you can bounce between all those things effortlessly, without anyone knowing.
I remember Jack telling me with Joe Perry, and I learned the hard way. He's like, pan it to where he's sitting. Because I was recording the band playing live.
Interesting.
You know, where they were, panned around, everything was great. When Joe came in, he sat down on the left side, and I had him panned on the right, which is traditionally where he is. Unfortunately, it was a really stupid thing to do because we're in a not very deep control room. So he basically, where he was sitting, was super quiet in the mix. And he came out to me after and he goes, first time I ever worked with him, turn me up. And it was like the first thing he ever said to me. Of course, so I'm like completely like terrified. And Jack was like, Joe's sitting over there. Should have panned the guitar to where he was sitting. I was like, okay. Just like obvious things like that, you know, would not have been an issue, but yeah.
But that's practical.
Practical, but I wasn't, you know, I was trying to do the perfect representation of the recording of the band playing live, forgetting that unless you're actually sitting in the middle of the console with the speakers hitting you perfectly, you're not hearing it like that.
Paying attention to the room.
Yeah.
Because if you had panned it the other way and he felt great about it, he might have said, okay, I want to do another take, I got an idea. You might have, I'm making up something, you might have inspired him.
Right.
And God knows what that would have gone. So that decision could have affected what the record would have been.
Yeah.
I made that up. It didn't happen, of course.
That's exactly how Jack thought about it, yeah.
But these are the things that I would love to build and instill into the preset generation. These dumb little things that have nothing to do with a blue face versus a black face 1176. I'm not saying that's not important, but so is this. Neither one's more important than the other. Thing is, the very definition of art is ever changing. That's the root of what it is. So the notion of like, oh gee, you know, it's not cool anymore because of X, Y, and Z, and when I walk through the snow, don't want to have the conversation. Not interested. That is not what it's about. It's ever changing. And it's the fun part. You know, I'm sure that when you look back on some of the beginnings of your career, as well as if I look back at the beginnings of my career, it's the journey that's the romantic element. It's not actually the arriving. Like, it was fun to get your first #1 record. It was fun to get your first Grammy. But really, it was the journey of like, can I do it? Can I be one of those guys? Am I gonna get there? How am I gonna get there? What do I need to do? I hear this guy does this. I hear this guy does that. How does he do that? Does he have this? Does he have that? And I think that's part of my concern I was saying to you earlier, is when I think about how much of us now are on social media of any kind, you've taken away the mystery. And I think that mystery is what's propelled some of us to greatness. Because in our mind, we make it much greater than it really is. He's got the green and the yellow striped purple LA2 that does this thing. Then you discover, no, it's just an LA2 that he has in the rack. He just put it on The Voice. Vocal was amazing. Person sang great. It was a great song. He didn't have a magic LA2. But when you didn't know that, you thought that person did. And you were on the hunt for that.
I agree.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I think one of the things I love, though, is this, though. It is how you communicate with people. Because that's the biggest thing that I like, is getting the performances from people. Or, like you're doing here, creating an atmosphere where people feel creative. That's a huge deal.
100%. Lots of times I've been asked to have opinions about, can you please go to the studio and listen to something and give us some input? And lots of times I've gone in and first thing you do is, let's all have a cup of coffee. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, okay, so we want to know what you think about this song. Okay, in a minute, but I want to ask you, do you think what Jay-Z is doing right now with Halftime makes sense? Like, how do you feel about that as an artist? Would you do that? Oh, well, let's talk about that for a minute. Mm-hmm. I don't even want to think about listening to the song until I understand who they are, what they're doing, what they're trying to say, right? Because what we do as a living with all these songs is we create poems. And those poems go out into the world. We don't know if they go to Africa, Mississippi, I don't know where they go, Germany, but they affect people's lives. Maybe they won't take their life because the song made them feel a certain way. Creates children. You might be responsible for a song that created someone romantically who just made the president X amount of years later. We don't know. That's the great responsibility that we actually have. Does that make sense?
Sure, absolutely.
That's a big deal. At the end of the day, that's really what we're doing, is we're involved with social commentary, emotional commentary. That's all it is. It's communication with music behind it.
I love the idea of the power of music a lot, and also the ability to empower people. You asked me why I started doing this, and it was that part. It was like, not to sort of combine the two things. It's interesting though, because I feel like there's a positive thing in getting rid of some mystery, but then opening up the art side of it.
If that's the focus.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, lots of times it's not the focus.
No, I know,
right?
I agree.
So if it's the other one, as you're explaining, then it's a lost cause.
Yeah.
But if there's that balance, what you are working very hard to achieve and what you're doing, then it's fantastic. It's fabulous. Because it's freeing as well. That's that combination of being free and the mystery, the sexy element of it.
Sure.
That yin and yang, right? Because everything we do is relative. Left, right, up, down, black, white, skinny, fat, boy, girl, sweet, sour.
Yeah.
It's all relative.
I'm just thinking of gear for a second because we touched on it briefly. I remember working on a record and we had a sidecar and it had a record light on it that wasn't connected. You know, like back in the olden days where you'd hit it on the console and the record light would come out so people wouldn't walk in. And I said to somebody, I said, if this song is a #1 hit, the record light's on, if we come back and track, would you turn that light off? And like, of course not. Even though it's not connected to any audio, I mean, that's a little bit about it as well. But I love that. That's the reason why we go and work in certain studios. Why I like a studio like Sunset Sound, because I walk in there and, you know, the Doors movie was playing earlier, the behind the scenes, the VH1 one. You go in there and you just seep up that history and it inspires you. You bring an artist in and they're like, oh my God, I'm in the room where one of my favorite songs was recorded. Now we all know it's a room and you could copy that room and put it somewhere else and put the same gear in and close your eyes and it will sound the same. But that's not the same. There's something about that we love. And hopefully we can sort of channel all of those things. And I know that that's something that you're very good at doing.
Well, there's definitely a feng shui, vortex, however you like to look at it. There are certain places that just work.
Yep.
And you can do all the exact same things in another environment and it doesn't make hits. But it's all the right stuff, right power amp, right headphones, right this, right that, whatever. Doesn't make hits. There is something to that. It's not an accident that Sunset Sound is what it is, or some of these other places. It's not an accident.
I remember being a musician and walking into those rooms and just like,
yes,
just takes your breath away.
It makes you bring your A game.
Yep, absolutely.
And the one thing about artistic people, in my opinion, everyone, any artistic person has an insecure gene. It comes at birth. Anyone who says they're not insecure is a droid. It comes at birth. All artistic people. Can I do this? Do they really think I'm great? Am I a fraud? This is in everybody, I believe. And once you become comfortable with that, then the people that you meet, like a Bruce Springsteen, or I don't know who you want to pick, I don't know why I pick him, but these kinds of people, non-ego, very normal. You're like, wait, but you're not weird. You're like approachable, fun to talk to. Yeah, because they figured it out. They're just a vessel. Just so happens they were the right place at the right time. At birth, they were given the talent, and they'd understand that the only thing they can take credit for is they did something with it. Mm-hmm. But Leo DiCaprio got the blue eyes and the blonde hair at birth. He didn't invent that. Now, he didn't sit around and not do anything with his talent. He can take credit for that, right? But it was God-given. This is what I believe. Once you come to terms with that, then everything changes. Okay, it's okay to be insecure. It's okay to be like, I'm not sure that's right. That's okay. It's fine.
Have you noticed that the experts, the ones that know everything, this is the right modal pattern, this is the right this is the right positioning, and they're really good technically at everything, but rarely, if ever, make great art?
100% agree. Because it's down to ones and O's effectively, in some ways. Art is like, it's magic, right? You've been in a room where you're working on something, you're like, I gotta get out of the way of this. Yeah. This is going, right? And I don't wanna be the one that derails it. It's bigger than us. When it's right, it's bigger than us. And in fact, even when the records are great, you put up the faders, you're just like, okay, more piano. That works. Less this. That works. Oh, turn up this. That works. Oh, turn that. It works every which way. Which are the records that also at the gig always work. So you talk to the band, you're like, yeah, tonight we couldn't, such and such didn't sound great. It's not really a great song. But the really great song always works every night at the gig. It's not dependent on the accoutrements. It's not dependent on the extra things. The core of what it is right. It'll always work.
I remember thinking that so strongly when the anthology albums came out in the mid-90s, mm-hmm. and you got George Harrison's demos. And he would like sing bow, 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 the parts that he wanted played over just an electric guitar and a lead vocal recorded live on a 2-track, or an acoustic guitar and a lead vocal. And you heard the songs and you're like, yeah. You could put this out. This could have been a single.
Yeah. If you can sit down and play it on a piano or an acoustic guitar, or just something simple, and you still get the feeling, it's a great song.
Did you see that, just as a total sideline, did you see the Yesterday movie, the Danny Boyle one?
Yes.
Yeah, I think they did a really good job of bringing that idea across. You know, it was a interesting, fun idea that, you know, everybody forgot who the Beatles were, and without making this a Beatles conversation, by the way, but just a great example. Because even his interpretation of the way he was doing the songs, it was still like, those are the songs. Yeah,
yeah.
It was an interesting.
It's really, really amazing.
Yeah,
I can't believe how many great songs they wrote. You're right, let's not make it a Beatles thing, but
yeah.
In some ways it kind of did the pop Bible of record making, essentially. You know, to this day, people still reference those things and look at those things. It was just right. Those 4 people together, it just worked.
We were talking off camera about the way different roles have changed now. But I think that was something that was very special about George Martin, is that he was a record producer and an A&R executive, and brought so many levels of talent that pretty much second to none. Now, you've worked in labels and had those kind of roles. Mm-hmm. How much was that of a challenge for you to be able to be at a label, but also be a producer, engineer, mixer as well?
Well, I started off as a bass player, right, and then became an engineer, and then became a mixer and producer. Right? And my goal has always been to try to be like a Kissinger. You know, I want to know a little bit about all of it. I know I can only be, quote unquote, an expert, if you will, in 1 or 2 areas. No one can be an expert in everything. And so the label was one of the last things to understand how that worked. Because United Ocean Way is so close to Capitol, Capitol would hold a lot of their A&R meetings actually in my room. So I got to see how those things went. And I wanted to be able to affect that and learn more about all of it. Promotion, PR, manufacturing, radio, how's all that work? I've had people come to me and say, we can't get these 2 stations. And I've said to the promotion people, bring me the people. What do you mean? Bring the guys that are the program directors, tell them to come to the studio. I'll put them behind the board and say, what do you need? Well, right now, acoustic guitars are really cool. Okay, here are the acoustic guitar faders. Let's put them in a place that you think you can sell. Mm-hmm. Not manipulation, the truth. Like, you need, as that program director, to feel that you're making the right decision. So let me make that right for you, as long as the artist is comfortable with it. And that was that example, and the example I just talked about with the A&R is what made me want to be involved inside of a label, to understand that part of it. Some of it was amazing, some of it was shocking. Shocking. I saw things like, that didn't just happen. Shocking. I spend so much time of my life to this day blocking for the artist. Always blocking. And being inside the label was another level of blocking. That was the positive thing about it for me.
I've got to say, your choice of Kissinger was pretty fantastic. For anybody who doesn't know who Henry Kissinger was, the fact, because that was somebody that wasn't American.
Correct.
So it's an outsider coming in and having a massively powerful role in American government. So I like that analogy.
Well, it's a person who sat on Air Force One and would say to the president, who he's actually advised 3 presidents, okay, when you go speak to the French president, don't talk about dogs. He doesn't like dogs. He likes this kind of wine, he likes this, he likes that, so that you can communicate the best with that person for the best result. The only way you can do that is to have an understanding of the different components. Then you can actually have those conversations for the better good, not manipulation, for the best result.
Sure.
And so that's why I always saw that in him. I like that part of him, like, that makes sense. So if I understand it from the record lens, A&R executive, as a player, as a record maker, I can do the best with the artist. I can sit with the artist and I understand the ecosystem. And that gives us a greater chance to success, which means their dream is fulfilled. Because I'm just helping them fulfill their dream. I am not the rock star. They're the rock star. How do I get behind them and get them to their dream? Which is not just their dream, it's everyone around them. Their significant other, their family, their band, the guy that's mixing the live show, and the list goes on. Everyone's affected in that system. It's their dream. The guy who's mixing their live show always wanted to be a live guy. Well, it affects him too. So it's the entire system. To be a great artist or to work with great artists, you have to be selfless. You can't be selfish. And it's a weird blend when you think about it. It's like you have to be selfless. At the same time, they're looking to you for courage. You have to give them a reason to take a step. I got you. Take the step. Doesn't matter if you fall off the cliff. Guess what? I put a net down there. It's okay. I got you. At the same time, you have to be selfless in that it's not your art, it's not your record. It's not about what you think it should be. It's what do they want to be? And how do I get it there? And how do I do it with the focus not on me? This is why you see a lot of artists have a successful record with Joe Blow, whoever it is, right? And then when they go to make the next record, especially if it's successful, they see the record coming, okay, well, we had a big hit. We sold double platinum, which means now they have what I call platinum power. So now the executive is nervous. Oop, they know something I don't. What do you want to do? Well, we made the record, so we're going to produce it ourselves. And it fails. Because their great record producer, the focus wasn't on him. They had no idea what he was doing. He was guided it. They thought it was all about them, which is what they need to feel. But they fail because they don't have the George Martin, right, who's sitting there saying whatever he's saying to get it to where it needs to go. They think it's them. Again, they need to think that. So it's this weird balance.
Oh, absolutely. I've been blessed, and I know you have as well, to make records with Jack Douglas and, you know, work with that level of producer. And it's effortless what they do because they do it so well. That somebody of that level can make everybody in the room feel important, everybody's opinion have value. And I'm sitting there engineering, just taking it all in and going, that greatness just happened because everybody brought their A game, because everybody felt like that they were of value and they were doing something important.
There was somebody there that made them feel like it's safe.
Yeah.
It's safe to create. Mm-hmm. I don't have to, I can just create. It's safe. Even though that person might be incredibly insecure. Mm-hmm. Sitting there going like, I don't know if this is right, but I'm telling the band. Inside they're like freaking out because remember, artistic people are, again, in my opinion, are insecure. It just comes with the gene. But somehow they just plowed through it and created that environment where people feel like, okay, I can do it. I can do this. It's a selfless, the producer is the rarest breed, in my opinion. More rare than an artist, more rare than a mixer or anybody. The great producer is a rare, rare breed. Think about it. He has to know what's going on musically, technically, put the right things. He's a chemist, he's a dentist, he's a psychiatrist, he's a musician. He's all these things, but he's not the star, but he makes the star. How many people have that ability? How many people are emotionally, socially, and spiritually evolved enough to even do that? Without being selfish, without being egocentric, without actually thinking it's all about them. Mm-hmm. How many people are on the planet like that? Very rare.
I agree.
Really, 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 really rare. That's the rarest breed, not the artist. Now, I know I said everything I just said about the artist, but in the context of what I'm saying, I think that's a true statement.
I agree. I think of the just producers only. I think of guys like John Leckie. Have you ever worked with him?
Yes, I never have, but I know who you mean.
It's just, when I think about it from an engineering perspective, All Things Must Pass, he was an engineer on there. I think he was, when he was super young, was an engineer on Abbey Road. He was involved in Abbey Road. And then, of course, he made like the Stone Roses' first record, which is very Doors influence. When I hear like, think of Peace Frog. That, you think of that and Stone Roses, how those grooves are locked in there. But then he goes off and makes the bends with Radiohead, which is a completely different thing. In the middle, he does a Cooler Shaker record. And so, but each one of those albums, it's, I think, the best moments from each of those bands. We can argue about that, but I think the best moments. But none of them sound like him. They sound like the band.
That is correct. People always say, yeah, what's your sound? I'm like, I don't want to have a sound.
Exactly.
I don't want to. I would rather be one of those guys that people look back on and go like, he was a great record maker.
Yeah.
He was just a great record maker. Well, what was his sound? Did he do? It's not about big drums or a bass sound or a guitar or a vocal sound or I don't know, whatever, orchestra sound, strings, whatever. He was a great record maker. That's the goal. Can you be a great record maker?
So going through my head the whole time, I'm thinking to myself, because of the way so much production is done now, not even necessarily whether it's a laptop or a whatever or tape or whatever, forgetting all of that for a second, so much production now is done as the producer, you know, becomes the multi-instrumentalist, the programmer, what we used to think of as programming back in, say, the 90s, where you'd have a programmer. There's less emphasis on the building the song from an organic level up. How do you feel, I don't know if this is a quick answer, how do you feel we can bring the skill set that we're admiring of the greatest producers into that environment where you walk into a room and there's a pair of speakers, there's a laptop or whatever it is. And again, I'm not trying to make it about the gear, but that sort of mentality of like the song is created in this environment, where we're talking about the song being created in that environment as a much bigger place. I wonder how we bring those two elements together.
So let's start off by saying that technology has always driven it. The only reason why Ringo's drums sound the way they sound is because they had a Fairchild. That's what they had. They didn't have a DBX 160. So as we go through, right, all the years, and somebody in a lab coat in Japan makes a DX7, for instance, one of the first FM synthesizers, they made Africa. But Africa couldn't sound like that unless that was made. So we have to always remember the technology drives part of it because it's the tool that we use, right? So the laptop, USB, everything that is, again, affecting the way art's made. I've had one publisher, head of a publishing company, and two massive, huge, very successful managers that have each 15, 16 artists underneath them, all say to me in the last 4 months, their pain point right now is they have people making records for them. It could be 2, 3, 4 people in a room. Top line, two laptop guys, somebody making a beat, whatever. But they're having a problem that there's nobody who's listening to the big picture saying, this is not right, that's not right. What about this, what about that? The people in that room don't know the art of record making. Not because they're stupid, because they didn't have to do it. So if you wanted to make a record feel and sound a certain way in the beginning, you thought about how you were going to record it, where you were going to put it, what microphones were you going to use, how are you going to do it creatively. Today, you just push 2 faders up, okay, there's the beat. You don't know how it got there, you just know that there it is. So your ability to identify some of the components and the ability to know why they work the way they work, you don't know because you don't know when you don't need to. Now, there's good and bad about that. Again, as I said earlier, art is ever changing. So the notion of like how it used to be done is the best way, no. It's gonna keep changing. So the fact that these 3 people have come to me in just conversations and said that this is their problem with huge artists means that our problem is gonna have to be solved. And so I think it will get solved. I think we're in the time right now of data mining being so important in every aspect of our lives, even in our personal lives, that it's segue's the wrong word. It's infiltrated into even music making. And at some point, people will start to figure out, okay, we need to understand the deeper level of this so that we can manipulate it more. Not because before it was greater, just so that we can manipulate it more. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting because I agree entirely. The technology is what shaped music through its whole career. The music career throughout its history. And we went from, recording. I mean, Al told me, Schmidt, that the first things he ever recorded as a teenager were direct-to-disc. Then it was 2-track tape. Then it was, actually, for a minute, Ampex 3-track tape.
Wow.
Because they didn't understand stereo. They had left, right, and center.
Right.
Then there was 4-track, etc. And so he's seen that whole evolution. And it makes me think of lots of things. I wonder what your opinion on this is, because this has been coming up a lot in discussion recently with people. A lot of people are very critical of the huge amount of tracks, and I do understand that. But I also defend some of it as well, because there was always a lot of tracks, but they were always bounced. I mean, one of my favorite songs, possibly favorite song, is Bohemian Rhapsody. It's a very popular song to like at the moment, because of the success of the movie. And if we were to break that down, as you know, there's like faders with like 16 tracks of vocals on them, even more sometimes.
That's right.
And they were bouncing down to that. But if we were to break that down on an individual level over a Pro Tools session, it could be, I don't know, hundreds of tracks. I don't know off the top of my head, but probably several hundred tracks. So I think the track count thing is frustrating probably as a mixer for you to receive a lot of stuff. But then if they've stemmed it down, so they've got their 16 on one side going to one fader, 16 on the other side going to another fader, you're probably looking at it and going, well, in old, that would have been one track, but now they're putting on individual faders. So I wonder for you, you see things change. I suppose my big question here is, do you think it's lack of commitment out of fear? That they're now going, well, I'm giving JJP these tracks because his resume, his ears are going to be able to demystify this. So they're a little fearful of making a decision because they know you're going to end up mixing it? Or do you think it's something else that's doing it? Well, it's a big question, sorry.
No, I mean, there's different ways to look at it.
I'd love to know what your...
I mean, a first immediate response,
Please.
knee-jerk reaction is, I don't care if it's 2 tracks or 100. I mean, people could say that.
Yep.
They could have said, well, yeah, I remember better when we would play it,
Sure.
and it went straight to 2-track. You had to play it in the room, blah, 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 blah. This BS of 4-track.
Yep.
This BS about 8-track, 16, 24.
224s. Yeah.
So on and so forth.
Yep.
We still made records. They still work. We still communicated things. They were still successful. Does it really matter? I don't know that it does.
And we always cheated.
Yeah, I just
People
don't.
cheated back in the 50s and slow tape down because you couldn't hit the note. You know, everybody did everything.
Yeah, 100%. So I don't understand that when they say, oh, too many tracks. Okay, well, why? I mean, that creates something. Mm-hmm. It actually creates something in you in terms of problem solving effectively.
I like that, yeah.
You know, like, how do I solve that route will make an outcome?
Sure.
So again, technology, who handcuffed you essentially in some ways, you had to find a way to do it. It's awesome. That's what art is.
Yep.
Right?
Yep, I agree.
And when I look back at, at some of these things that we had to do as technologies evolved, that maybe, as I said, handcuffed, it was good. Because we figured out something. So for instance, as a dumb example, I'll never forget Arif Mardin telling me, when he was working on Chaka Khan, I Feel For You, right? Because Arif was one of my teachers. I had 3. A guy named Arif Mardin, Glenn Johns, and a guy named Bill Schnee. These are the 3 that I spent time with.
Pretty amazing 3.
To learn from, because each had a different decade. So I wanted to understand, back to the Kissinger, how was it done in the 60s, how was it in the 70s, and how was it done in the 80s? And if I can understand those 3 decades, I can make the 90s forward, right? So I remember him telling me they sampled Chaka Khan's voice into an AMS to pitch fix it. Remember, we didn't have, at that point, any way to fix the pitch except manually in an AMS. And one of the things that you would do with a 1580 AMS is you would do, quote unquote, what they call truncate. Find the beginning of where that person's saying. So there was a guy pushing the little button, going Chaka Khan, and Arif heard them, went, what are you doing? Oh, I'm just trying to find the beginning of the song. No. Chaka Khan. That's how that happened. Mm-hmm. That would have never happened had they had the way to fix the tuning of the voice. The fact that they didn't have that and were trying to problem solve created one of the best things ever. Chaka Khan, Chaka. It's cool. Never would have happened. That's the beauty. So the idea of like, oh, too many tracks, like, well, no. You're going to try to figure that out in some way. You might put it through a little submixer that you generally don't use because you don't have enough inputs, only to discover that by accident, the submixer had a treble control that was full blast. And when you plugged it in, it made these really bright voices. You're like, oh my God, that's kind of like 10cc, I'm Not in Love. You never would have done that. Mm-hmm. It was an accident. These are the things of the beauty of how things are created in art. And when you talk to people, how did you do this? How did you do that? I would say at least 70% of the time was an accident. It was a total accident. When the knack, when I very first started, and I was an assistant, didn't know the difference between a mic cord and an extension cord. And Michael Chapman was making the knack, and they had an EMT 250 that was on the snare drum. And someone sat on it in their session, and it pushed it all the way down to real low, the lowest time constant possible. And at the same time, it set it because they sat on it. And it was like, no one move in the room. What is that? Why does the snare sound like that? Accident. Now that created that sound, but that was an accident. There are millions of those. Why do you not want to go down that road of the accident factor, of things that just happen that are bigger than us? We take the credit. People go like, oh yeah, I knew. No, you didn't. I was there. Here's what happened. It's the beauty, I think.
Oh, I agree entirely.
So I don't like the idea of the limitation in the old days. It's like, no, I don't know. I don't want to make I really don't want to make a record on tape. I really don't. I don't know, maybe that's a bad thing to say.
No, I don't think it's a bad thing at all. But you're blessed with understanding. You've seen all the spectrum.
Yes.
So you can take what is great about a limitation in one way and see it as a positive, and then see all of the advantages of having unlimited technology in other ways. I think that's the beauty of experience.
The biggest advantage is that you have the ability to know, going back to what I said earlier about things being relative, you know what that sounds like. So you can take digital and make it sound 70s if you know what the 70s sounded like. You can keep manipulating until you get that feeling, because it'll do it. You can make it sound like tape. But you have to have that preset in your brain to understand how to get there. So maybe what I should have said earlier is that maybe that's one of the drags about some of the modern technologies, that you don't know the older technology to be able to use that in your palette. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
it's not that it's better.
Yeah.
It's better. It's just like another thing in the collage of creativity.
For me, it's so easy to do the basic technical discussion. I mean, I've said this 1,000 times. You can open up YouTube tomorrow and type in mixing a kick drum and see 50, probably more, let's just say 50 videos. And they're all going to say this, and you know what I'm going to say. Boost the kick drum at 60 hertz. Find the low mid somewhere around about 250 and 400 and pull them out. Go to 2.5 to bring up the click, or maybe 7K if you're doing metal. I mean, they're all like, you're going to find the same bunch of information, and you are going to be able to get a pretty good sounding kick drum, you know, with all of that information. However, the stuff that we love, stuff that you and I are talking about, yeah, sometimes it does follow that rule. Of course it does. I mean, there's plenty of times that you put up a record and it has these certain set of rules. But then the greatest of the greats is like some random 1 mic on the drum kit, 10 mics on the drum kit, no mics on the drum kit, bleeding from the other room, all these random things that make stuff amazing and different and exciting. And so what I tend to do nowadays is I get stuff to critique, and maybe it's like super roomy. Maybe they've brought up the room mics and stuff like that in a way that I never would have thought of. And I take a deep breath and go, that's actually kind of cool. So why don't I see what they've done and try and improve their vision of it, rather than going, you know, room mics are too loud. I mean, you've lost it. No, maybe this guy or girl is actually thinking outside of the box. So my mixed critiques are not sort of within those boundaries, because I almost feel like the basic technical knowledge, I don't want to minimize the basic technical knowledge, but I feel like that's, we were talking about outside, is sort of almost entry level now, which is why there's so many YouTube channels, because, you know, Eric could start a YouTube channel and do well. I mean, he has the basic knowledge and he could do that. But the stuff we're talking about here is almost a given. You need to know that. You do need to know how to do all of those things to record. But the next level stuff, the stuff that communicates to us, is so much more above that stuff. So for me, just to reiterate, the mixed critiques, there's some of that when there's obvious bad mistakes. But now it's more like, well, I like this. You're making it sound more like a live band in a garage. Go further that way. Trash it out a little bit. Maybe try some really bad, dirty slap delays. I don't know, think more like, make this like a garage rock version of the song. It's not how I produced it, but you know what? It's more exciting than my mix. I like this.
But if that became a success, let's say a hit,
Yep.
everybody would now be putting the room mics up.
Right.
That's how it happens.
Yep. Yep.
So now it's like, oh, I knew that. Not really.
Yep.
That's what happens.
Yep.
So you have to just follow the dream, the instinct.
Yeah.
Right? I think.
I agree. So for me, that's what my mixed critiques are, is to find the essence of something that's special and encourage that. Because creativity is king. The creativity is far more important than any of the technical. However, I do believe you need to know the technical.
Why not both?
Yeah, why not both?
Why? Why not both?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And we're as good as the artists we work with.
100%. Yeah, I mean, that's, you know when you work with a great artist too.
Oh, yeah.
And that means you also know when you're not working with a great one.
Right.
And
right.
they think they're great. That's painful. Like, oh, they don't got it.
All right, here's a dumb question, but I like fan questions. Do you have a favorite moment? Favorite artist, a favorite recording? Is there something that, because this is kind of a fan question, but I like doing those kind of questions.
Interesting. I know I'd have to think about some moments. One really comes to mind real fast is Iris. I don't know why. Because I remember when the Goo Goo Dolls song, when we did that song, I can remember leaning back like this on the 224 tracks that were behind me and seeing the band and the producer behind the console on a Wednesday at 11 a.m. And they turn in and looking at me like, oh yeah. And that feeling in the room of like, that's gonna go. And that's gonna be huge. And that sense of accomplishment, the enthusiasm, the excitement that you gotta be a part of something that was really great. A part of it. You didn't create it, you're just a part of it. It's so satisfying. And I can see it in my head right now. I can see their faces, I can feel the moment. I know that it was 11 o'clock on a Wednesday morning. That's exciting. It's a hard question to answer because
that's a great answer.
So many records I've been a part of it. I mean, even the one I was telling you about earlier, that this band I'm working with, Darlinghurst, right now. You know, having the A&R person send me the notes. Hey, we went from 14, 2 to 1, and then seeing people talking about it. This is the hottest thing, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, wow.
Doesn't get old, that feeling.
We never. The feeling of going to the gig and they hit that first chord and you're like, wow, we did it. We could have gone left, we could have gone right. We could have recorded it this way, we could have produced it that way. We could have done all these things, but somehow we made all the right decisions to get it over the goal, to actually get the touchdown. Never gets old. It's so exciting because it's a puzzle, essentially. If that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. I remember I did a video with Brent Fisher, you know, the composer and orchestrator, super talented.
For a lot of stories about him.
Yeah, really, really nice guy, very talented. And he, and his dad is super, super famous, Claire Fisher, tons of, yeah, Oscars and Grammys and all kinds of stuff. And the first thing I did is I said to him, how was the recording, you know, at the end of the session? He goes, it was great. I learned so much. I just loved that. I just was like, oh.
Yes. Yeah. You never stop learning. It's my only fear is that you wake up one morning and you say, I'd rather go to the beach.
Yeah.
I think it's over. Mm-hmm. This, in my opinion, and I'm nervous to say this in a Me Too world right now, so please take it with the right attitude. But this basically is the other woman.
Right. No, I understand.
It is. It's the other woman in your life. Or for a woman, it's the other man, however you want to look at it. But it's the competitive aspect to your relationship because it obsesses your mind. You think about it all the time. You love it. Mm-hmm. You take care of it. You groom it. You want to empower it. That's a relationship. It's a lifestyle. This is not a hobby. If you choose to do this, you got to be all in. It's a lifestyle. Almost everything else takes a backseat. Almost. It's the truth.
Trust me, I fully understand, yeah.
You know, most of us go through 2 and 3 marriages. It's not uncommon. If you talk to the guys that are very successful, they're on the 2nd or the 3rd marriage. It's the truth. When we can I can lie but you gotta understand that this is what you're making a commitment. It's serious. And for us, in a position that we're in, We just go from one to the next. Remember, the artist or the band, whatever it is, now they go do something else. Next one. They want to go to 2 a.m. too. They don't, well, I was just doing this other, okay, well, that was those guys. What are they called? I don't even know those guys. This is my record. They want full attention, full everything. But this is your 5th one that you've done. Not your month 5, let's say, or 3 of the, whatever it is. Producing, mixing is all different, right? Recording as far as time. But it's a commitment. And I can't tell you how many times I've been driving home listening, and I'm like, this ain't right. Call the studio. Guys, power it back up. I'm coming back in. It's 12:30. I know. It's not right. Ours is coming at 11. We don't got it. But it's 12:30. It's almost 1. I know. Light it all up on my way back. That's what it takes. That's a lifestyle. I'll never forget being in a session. There was this assistant. And we're working, and his cell phone rings. And this is what I hear. I only hear this side. I know. And I really thought that this session be, I know I said 7, but that it's still, look, I want to spend time with your mom too. And I know she's out. Look, I'm not saying that we can do it on Saturday. I know last time I said that, I didn't do it. But I really will try. This is the conversation he's having. And I know what she's saying on the other end. And I thought, the guy is just a wreck. And I understand it from her standpoint too. Her mother's from out of town. He promised to be there. But what do? I know producers, famous producers, that thought, okay, I've arrived now. I only work to 7 p.m. I'm sure you've heard the stories. Mm-hmm. Now what do? The guy's like singing, or the girl's singing, or someone's doing whatever, and it's like on. Excuse me, we're stopping the session? I don't think so. That's why I say it's a lifestyle. Mm-hmm. You are a slave to the creative time clock. It will tell you when you're going to stop. No wife, no husband, no mother-in-law, nothing. The only thing that will stop it in its tracks is someone got in a car accident. The thing that concerns me now when I look at this is I have missed weddings. I have missed birthday parties, all kinds of things. And at the time, I didn't go to those things because the record had to be done. There was a deadline. I can tell you the weddings or the birthdays I've missed, but I can't tell you the record that stopped me from going to it. Mm. That's something to think about.
Yeah.
Can't tell you the record, but I can tell you the wedding I didn't go to.
I have a very good friend. I don't want to name out him here, but he's an older producer. We were talking about marriage and family and kids. I said, "What's the one thing that your kids said to you that you remember more than anything else?" And he said he asked one of his sons, what was your childhood like, And his son said, full of broken promises.
That's painful.
It's painful, yeah. I mean, no, they're close, don't get me wrong. He's close with his kids and he's a great guy and the kids love him dearly, but just an honest answer, broken promises. Yeah.
It's something to be considered. If you're watching this and you're thinking about getting in it, you got to think about this. This is a reality.
Yeah, it's definitely a lifestyle choice.
It's a lifestyle. You're married to it, essentially, to be really successful and good at it, in my opinion.
Oh no, I agree. I mean, it's anything at any level. If you're a musician and you want to be the best musician, you can't. When I practice, for instance, it's like if I'm in a groove and I'm practicing and I'm working on something, I don't want to leave it. I can't put it down. I can't step away from it. That might be such a huge breakthrough for me,
Well, you can tell when you're riding the wave.
Yeah.
When you're on that magic carpet, can't stop.
Yeah.
You just can't.
So speaking of that, so you've now got the studio on your premises, in your home. Is how that probably makes two things. Access is easy. You're not having to call up the studio at 11:30 at night and say, fire everything back up. You can literally just walk down and come in here at work anytime, day or night. But it also affords you the ability to be able to work with any artist and not look at the clock in the same way and go, well, they've only got X number of dollars, so I can only be in the studio for 2 days.
Well, you and I both know, first of all, there aren't Klaxon studios.
Right.
For that reason. Effectively, It's Las Vegas.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And there's been so many things I've had to turn down because they don't have the money. I mean, remember, we're just coming to a place where streaming is bringing lots of money to the labels. The way it works is the labels get 70%. Well, they actually get 60%, the right holders, and the publishing gets 10%. So that means the streaming company has to work on 30% gross, right? That's been very painful and very hard for budgets. So I've had to say no to a lot of things I didn't want to say no to. And that's how I arrived to, you know what? I can have the place in Hollywood for the multi-platinum artists that want what that is. The three runners jumping, the parking spot, etc. And I can have this for artists actually that like the idea, because there's actually people who actually like the idea of not recording in a commercial environment. They actually prefer it. So they want to sit here like this, three of them back there on the couch, two sitting over here, one out there, messing around with someone else. And we're talking just like this. Let's try this. Like, you know what? I never thought the song should start that way. So let's copy these 4 bars, put it at the front, and we can create no stress. Doesn't matter if we get done this time or that time. No one cares. It's a different thing. The professional studio, there's a time clock. It's expensive. You can't just keep going. People have to come and go, whatever. It's a different thing. They're both great. So why not, again, even like I'm talking about creativity, why not have both? So, if I want to record a band, I don't want to do that here. I'd rather go in the studio where I have all the practical things, the mic stands, the headphone jackets right there, the room, the people. Though we don't do a lot of that kind of recording, obviously, but it makes sense to do it in that environment. This is a different thing. And it allows me to work on things that the people don't have the money. But I want to do it. Like even the thing the band I referred to on this a couple of times now, Darlinghurst, they don't have the money. So I took it on. We did it here. They got number 1. That would have never happened. Also, the other thing is that with less money means sometimes they'll say, let's do these 3 songs out of the 10. Mm-hmm. They can't afford all 10. How do I not know there's not one other one in there? Mm-hmm. That if I had worked with them on it, we would have all had success. And that happens.
Sure.
So I really don't like the money dictating. The problem is that if we really think about what this is, art and commerce have no business being together. None. It's a fraudulent concept. So the root of it is a fraudulent concept, right? Michelangelo got to paint the ceiling. He didn't have to worry about the money. Now when someone
took
signs,
a lifetime.
That's right. And when people now sign, they have to worry about the money. Here, I don't care. Oh, you want to pay $1,000? Okay. Oh, you only got $500? All right, I don't care. Because I have the other sessions that are really paying the money because they can afford it. Because frankly, they come off the road and the studio is playtime for them. The road is work, studios play. And if they're hugely successful, platinum artists, they don't care. So I want to find a balance between that, which is what I'm doing, and having a good time at it. Because at the end of the day, what's always driven me is the art. Always has been what's driven me. That's the fun part. And the money is important, I understand, but it's a drag when it's in the driver's seat. So God has smiled upon me. It's afforded me to have this room that we're sitting in, this environment that we're sitting in, and I want to share it.
Amazing.
Not everyone gets that.
Somebody asked me, what if the studio was on fire, what would I take with me?
That's a good question. I don't know what I would take. Maybe my Fairchild. But part of that's because I'm attached to it because it's the one that we use to make the Fairchild plugin.
Right.
And it's just such a great piece of gear. There are certain pieces of equipment, SM57, Fairchild, 1176, API, Neve, whatever, SSL, they just work.
Yeah.
Some things just work. And I think they're accidents, effectively, because you see those manufacturers never be able to repeat it again, right? So sometimes stuff just comes together right, and it's really, really good, and it'll work. But sometimes you may have a particular one that's just really special for whatever reason, right? Values change, whatever. It's just right, and it just has a sound to it, that you really like. And there's a few pieces like that in this room that would be hard for me to leave behind.
Well, that sounds like a double whammy, because that's a great piece of equipment, but it also sounds like it has some sentimental value as well.
Yeah, it does. I bought it for $10,000, and I think they're worth upwards of 30 plus at this point, which is crazy, right? I mean, what piece of equipment? I remember when I acquired a lot of my equipment early on, I always kind of saw it too also as CDs, effectively, meaning that they'll all go up in value.
Yeah.
And as I was saying earlier, in my opinion, we always talk about how it's not about the gear, right? Yeah. And so purposely I go the other way, because there's already 100 million videos of people that do what I do saying that it's not about the gear, and it's all about the emotion and the feeling and all this. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's true. But as I said before, there's literally $1 million of gear around them. So I try to balance it the other way.
Sure.
Even if the gear was just on to make you feel secure, it's worth it. And there's a component of that. It's basically the safety belt when we get in the car.
Sure.
Kind of like, okay, I'm safe. I have a belt on if I get in an accident. In some ways, it's kind of that, because we don't use all the gear all the time. And the other thing about the gear that's important when you have a lot of it is that, in my opinion, is that it's kind of like having a Telecaster, a Strat, Jazzmaster or whatever, a Mustang, where maybe you're going through your Gibson phase, you're playing SGs and Les Pauls or whatever, and then a string breaks, but you don't have a string. You go, well, I know I got this Tele in the closet. So you grab the Tele real quick, and then you're like, why did I forget about my Telecaster? This thing's really amazing. Yeah. And then it inspires you and takes you off on a whole other thing. So the gear is kind of like that. You rediscover. You go through a phase of using a lot of something because you think it's really great, and then you find something else that you get as new and you forget about it. And then it inspires you later, like, oh, I forgot how great this was. Now you're off on that. So I think it's important, if you can, to have a lot of different tools for inspiration, for creation, for rediscovery, for learning something a year later that now you can apply to that tool that you didn't have a year before. So now you can take a different direction with it. I think that's what's good about having a lot of pieces of gear. It makes you feel good, it gives you security, it's beautiful, inspires you, makes you proud, makes the people around feel like this is fun. It's all part of the experience. And I think that's really a smart way to look at it. I think to say that it doesn't matter, that it's all about the song and nothing else matters, and emotion, and it's like, yeah, that's true, but that's true too. Why not have the whole pie? Why not?
Yeah.
I've never really understood this, because I see people say it all the time.
Right.
And again, they're surrounded by $2 million worth of equipment.
Yeah, like I said, I subscribe to all of those views, all simultaneously. I think obviously one of the beauties in saying not using the gear as, we were talking about earlier, is just to get people started making music. Because obviously, we know from live 2-track recordings from the 40s and 50s that, hey, you can do it all on 2 tracks. But as we've been saying in and out of camera, there's no right way or wrong way. And the skills is the best skill to have is to have as many skills as possible.
Yeah.
Ton of acquired knowledge.
So let me just ask you.
Please.
You've done quite a bit of these videos.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Lots of reasons. One of the reasons we talked about earlier was to demystify, not from the perspective of the equipment, but of the passion, the understanding, the commitment, bring all of that stuff forward. Because one of the things that I think had been presented so much in that sort of more backslapping way that we were talking about, like, oh my God, you're amazing. No, you're amazing. Is this sort of idea of, sort of inherent superiority. I want to get back to the bit that I relate to, which is love of music, the passion that comes with it, just like I want to create something great that we were talking about over lunch. That mixed in with the sheer bloody hard work that it takes.
Right. Tenacity.
Yeah.
Never giving up.
Yeah.
Failing.
Yeah.
Actually hearing something on the radio that you did and going like, that doesn't sound good. Like I just heard my mix or my production between known person and known person on the other side. And you're like, it's just not as good. And then going through your mind like, oh, so everyone else is gonna notice that too. I'm embarrassed. I gotta do better. And that drive to make sure the next time you're as competitive or you sound as good, having pride, wanting to be great at what you do, caring, drive, getting back up. I always say to my assistants, always, okay, go get the artist, let's listen to the mix. And as he goes out the door, I always say, genius or shit. We're gonna find out in a minute. They don't care about the other three that were like even Grammy Award winning. Mm-hmm. They just know like, that's not good. Mm-hmm. And so you're no good. And every day, which is really interesting about this business, every day, you're supposed to hit a home run. I don't know anyone who does that. It's actually not possible. But we're expected every day to knock it out of the park. No one ever says that's good enough. You know what? The other three mixes you did were really good. This was not quite as good, so that's okay, and then we'll get the next one. And no, they already forgot about the other three. This one's no good. So it's very interesting that, you have to keep yourself in check and have the ability to take those hard knocks, but keep going because you're an artistic person, right? You have your doubts, you have your fears, you have your concerns, you have your successes. This is reality. And I think that's one of the beauties about what we have now with the digital revolution is our ability to go like, okay, I don't have this nailed, but we can come back to it. Let's go on to the next one. When I work, I will always go through all the songs very quickly, tart them up, fix kicks, digital knots, pull up the things, whatever it might be right, and just keep combing. Because as you go through that, you can figure out like, oh, this really works on this particular project. For whatever the reason, the way it was recorded, it likes this. Mm-hmm. And now I can apply that to some of the other songs. And it's a lot different than I remember in the analog perspective, where like, no, that's it. Like, there's no recall. If you're gonna do it again, you're gonna do it again. Yep. And now we don't have that. Pull it up, that's what it was. Can I make it better? This is the beauty of the digital revolution, in my opinion. I mean, it started with SSL. SSL gets the credit, in my opinion, for making us artists. Because when we had total recall, that meant we could take another shot. I mean, the guitar player, he gets to do the solo again. The singer can sing it 50 times. The songwriters can rewrite the bridge. But we were like, no, you're a moron. But now, we're not a moron. It's like, okay, recall it. So now we're on the same level, which puts us in a level of being artistic. They get a credit for that. Can't take that away from them. This is the beauty of what I think they brought and what the digital revolution brought for us. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think, like we were talking about at lunch, I think digital is unfreaking believable. The fact that we can do almost anything we can imagine with sound can be done. Maybe everything, for all I know. I think the tools are there. It all just comes down to how the tools are used. That's really all it is.
So you were saying earlier to me that In fact, maybe you can recount it. This era that you thought was really great. Can you recount that?
For me, it's like, and you can argue about the end and beginning date, but there's a period of the mid to late 70s to the sort of mid 80s where for me, and for many people, we talk about this, that we love the combination of amazing musicianship, great production, with incredible songwriting. And probably arguably with all of that comes massive diversity. How you could put on a record by some of your favorite artists and they would explore loads of different genres. There wasn't like, that sort of period, especially in modern rock in the 90s, where you'd have the hit song and then you'd buy the 10-song album and the other 9 songs would be a version of that one song with the exact same drum sound on every single one, and the same guitar sounds. I'm sure you've heard people talk about that happening. In those days, there was this sort of idea of like, no, the Beatles were they were the ones we were trying to aspire to. And the way that the Beatles would have like Revolver, where it's like, is it Taxman, which is almost indie rock by today's standard, or Got to Get You Into My Life, which is just basically horn section and a singer, or is it Yesterday, strings, acoustic guitar and a vocal. That legacy lived on all the way through the 70s and just sort of came to a massive fruition for me in that mid to late 70s through the mid 80s, where people had that legacy, they wanted that kind of push the boundaries, but we, like you're pointing out, we had the birth of the SSL 4000. We had really quiet, incredible studio tape machines. And we had some of the best studios in the world with great engineers and producers, and musicianship was valued really highly. So for me, it's like albums like, So by Peter Gabriel, or Hounds of Love by Kate Bush, or Supertramp, Breakfast in America, 10cc, pretty much anything they did in that period. So many artists, more than I don't want to leave anybody out, but we were talking about Glass Houses, Billy Joel, The River, Bruce Springsteen. I mean, these just masterpiece after masterpiece. Thriller, Off the Wall. I mean, what a golden period. It really was amazing.
So what you're pointing out is that the technology, the art, the production, all of it came to a beautiful meeting of the minds all at once.
With a massive love for songs. I think that's the big part of it.
So today you would say that's not where we're at. In other words, it's not all connected.
Yeah, I think that's the sort of, because we were talking also about how if I put a video up with strings on and it's all about live orchestra, somebody will comment, oh, I can do that in the box now. I'm not saying everybody says that, but a percentage of people's attitude is like, why would I need to record live strings? And then I'll do a video featuring somebody, either me or somebody else, using programmed strings. And then somebody will remark, but why don't you use live strings? Then I'll do a video of recording drums with 1, 2, or 3 mics. And somebody will say, well, my drum sounds to be more modern and I need to individually mic it. And then I'll do a video where I'm using a massively mic kit, but I might supplant and put samples in. And then somebody's critical of like, why can't you just record it with 1, 2, or 3 mics? And my answer always is, you need to understand, or at least I believe, you want to understand all of those approaches so that you can do, as you were saying much more succinctly than I'm going to say, that you can do whatever best serves the song and the creativity.
It's interesting, people, when they say modern, and I think to myself, well, what does that really mean?
I have no idea.
Right?
It's just a word I hear.
No, I do too. And the reason why I bring that up is I see people chase modern, especially legacy artists, thank you. And you see them try to chase quote unquote modern. Mm-hmm. And then you say to yourself, okay, so why are you doing that? You've made 10 great records. And now you think that you have to have programming or this or that to be modern. And then meanwhile, Adele 21 comes out, piano, bass, drums, background vocals. That's it. And a voice that can sing, and a great song, and it goes through the roof. So was that person chasing modern? No. That's the basic, literally the basic roots that we've been doing for 50 years. So I don't understand why people don't look at that and go, well, then I guess it's just really about really a great song, really communicating properly, it being balanced, just the basic things, being balanced right, etc., voice being presented correctly, etc. Just real basic, rudimentary things. And it works.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then these people chase, quote unquote, modern, and it fails. It's the weirdest thing. I'll never really understand. I'll never come to terms with this.
Well, I think the thing is that I hear you and hanging out with you today, I know you have a really massive, greater understanding. But if I was to just take what we just talked about and use as a soundbite, most people would, I'm not paraphrasing you all what you're thinking, but a lot of people would take that and go, oh, Joseph Puig is just saying that you should only do songs like with live instruments in a room.
Oh, no, that's not saying that at all.
I know you're not saying that. See, what happens is people, they don't.
So that's what happens with the string analogy you brought
That's what happens to the analogy. We're trying to say, and I believe strongly, that there is probably a kid in this world at the moment, anybody, an adult, a person in this room at the moment, maybe with a cell phone for all I know, writing and producing the simplest, most amazing idea ever. And there's probably somebody at the moment in Carnegie Hall recording an orchestra doing just something just as great. There's the two extremes, and we know that they exist and everything in between. And it's coming to terms with that and not pretending or believing that anything is more valuable than anything else. All that matters is the result of this. And I think that this is a tough discussion for lots of people to really understand.
I think what we're talking about is being honest.
Yeah, honesty is very important.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I agree.
If you're honest, it will resonate.
Yeah.
Period. And whatever that is, just being honest. It will resonate. Because I feel bad for people when I see them struggling with quote unquote being modern.
Yeah.
And I just think to myself, just be honest, be real. It works every single time.
Yeah. I think all of our favorite artists went through that. I think until, we're all big Beatles fans. Everybody loves the Beatles. But there was a period with, Paul McCartney solo, which was pretty unlistenable. It wasn't what the Paul McCartney we wanted to hear. And then over the last, 10 or 20 years, he's gone back to touring, making records and doing everything in a way that makes sense for Paul McCartney. Like I remember when that Memory Almost Full record came out, I put it on, I was like, oh, this is a good record. I like this. Mm-hmm. It sounds like Paul McCartney in a studio with some good musicians or doing some stuff on his own. Whatever the combination was, it felt like he wasn't concerned about what you're saying, being hip or cool or whatever. He just made a record that sounds like him. I think so. It's probably part of the journey for everybody. The Stones have obviously been very guilty of that through their careers, especially sort of, in the later period where they would use whatever they thought was, the hippest or...
What I'm saying is important is that artists in the quest of perfection lose themselves.
Yeah.
They don't sometimes understand that their imperfections are the beauty. So and it's what makes them unique.
So have we basically answered a lot of our discussion today here? What we've been talking about on and off camera is what is amazing about modern technology, what's amazing about records coming up and all this kind of stuff. But I feel like maybe that traditional is the wrong word because it's evolved and it's different in every situation. But that role of producer is a big, big deal and maybe what's being lost in a lot of these kind of things. Because you were talking about earlier, and I know this, I've been in these rooms where you have like 3 or 4 writer-producers in a room. And you were talking about how the A&R guy who was involved in a particular project was frustrated because it didn't feel like there was anybody really, what's the right word, directing it, producing it.
There wasn't a captain. There wasn't a captain. And not only was there not a captain, there wasn't a captain that crashed a ship before.
Right.
And knew what was around the corner.
Right.
Said, no, you don't want to do this because this is what happens. Right?
And our intern over there, Fong Boy, was saying that she lives in the Netherlands and there's no real options and opportunities to get engineering-only experience because all the newer, younger, up-and-coming producers are producer, engineers, songwriters, mixers, all-in-one people. And so they're controlling the whole thing. And then my fear is that the problem is you're relying on the technology to dictate it, and you're not stepping away and being able to sit back and listen to what's going on, like you're saying.
Well, it's part of the evolution, right? Because I remember when the engineer-producer first came, people are like, wait, you can't have that. You're supposed to have an arranger, a producer, and engineer. What do you mean one guy is doing both? How can the engineer also be the producer? He's too technical. He doesn't know anything about music, right? So it's just the evolution. Sure. Effectively, the program director for the radio station was really the DJ.
Sure.
He was just he was DJing, except on the radio, not at the club, but he was DJing.
Sure.
And now we have the DJ. It's just an extension, really,
Sure.
of what's happening with the program director, partly because we're moving into the streaming world. I mean, it's all, if you think about it all kind of makes sense.
Sure.
And like everything, it'll go through an evolution, and there'll be things that work, and there'll be things that won't work, and we'll arrive to something that's great. Again, I don't know when that will be,
Right.
but we'll arrive to, that sounded actually poor because it sounds like I'm saying things aren't great now, and that's not true.
No, I understand.
But to a better level, everything that we've done, we get greater at it, right? When we start with multi-track recording, we made mistakes, right? We've made mistakes as we've gone along, and then we've fixed them, and then made another mistake. I think now, I personally am very excited about a lot of things I hear and see, and I think the tools we have are amazing, and I think it's only going to get better. I'm looking forward to the future. I see the future is very, very bright.
Me too. I'm always beyond cautiously optimistic. And I think to clarify, when I'm talking about the engineer, producer, mixer guy or girl, I've been that person 1,000 times myself. I'm not putting it down. I'm saying the acquired knowledge is the part that I want to impart, is like searching it out. That's what I did. I listened to records. I wanted to know why. I was blessed to be old enough to flip a record over and read who worked on it and try and, put these pieces together. For me, it was buying Sound or Mix Magazine or whatever, reading an article with you in it or something and saying, well, how did he do that? I mean, nowadays, of course, the information is so much easier to find. But yeah, it's getting out of my own head, getting away from the restrictions that the freedom gives you. This freedom to do everything also restricts you in a way because you lean on it too heavily. And suddenly it's like, well, I can time everything and tune everything, so I will do that.
When I first started making records with certain bands, certainly as a record producer, more than as an engineer, I would try to protect, because I block for artists, I would try to protect them and tell them, don't do this and don't do that. And then I realized one day, that's like telling your child, don't put your finger on the fire of the stove. But Daddy, it's beautiful, it's blue, and I want to touch it. It's this pretty blue, and it's yellow in the middle. No, it'll hurt you. You turn around and they scream because they put their finger in. And what you realize as you grow as a record maker, that people have to go through these experiences. They have to go through them. You can't stop them. And that's part of the creative process of them learning. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely.
And so
I agree.
I think that's part of it. So in a sense, you have to be an adult. You have to be able to step back as a record maker, as a true record producer, and let them go through these experiences, even to the point of being the ultimate selflessness. And what I mean by that is this. An artist has a freshman record, a sophomore, a junior, and a senior record. Each one of those records are a different experience for that artist in their growth path, right? Now, if they have a freshman record that's really successful, that means the sophomore record is almost impossible to make. It's really hard. The expectations are massive from the public, from the fans, from them, from the record company, from everybody. But you have to gauge that that's their second record. So you can't go from, for lack of a better description, you can't go from Meet the Beatles to Abbey Road. Irresponsible. You have to say to yourself, okay, I would like to work with this artist again, but I can't make this second record like the fourth record because I want to make sure no. Irresponsible record producer. You have to go, nope, this is the second record. The fans need to discover, just like they had to discover REM. You can't kick REM.
Can't start out of time.
Not fair.
Yeah.
That's irresponsible. It's really tough. This is why I keep saying the producer is a hard breed, because that's a very responsible, sensible, evolved way to look at it. But it's not necessarily best for you.
You know what's interesting?
But it's best for the artist.
No, and I completely agree.
But that's just saying why you have to let them go through this thing.
No, I think the point is amazing and very well taken. Unfortunately, and you've probably heard this, an A&R guy said to me once, he said, using the Beatles as an analogy as well, he said, no artist can put out Please Please Me now for the first record. They've got to start with Revolver.
I think I can make examples of...
Oh, I'm sure you can, but that's
not true.
But that's sort of an A&R perspective of just like they want out of the gate swinging. And it's. Do you remember when U2 won when they got their Rock and Roll Hall of Fame thing? Do you remember when they got up?
Yeah, I do.
Bono gets up and says, thanks for the. I'm paraphrasing everything. Thanks for the lifetime achievement, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. However, we're only here because of Chris Blackwell, because he let us make what I think I can't remember if he said 3 or 4 records before they recouped, and he said, what artist now would be afforded?
None. In the day of A&M, they would literally sign an artist for 5 records firm.
Yeah.
And then they would say, see you on the 3rd record. And you'd be like, well, you just signed me. Don't you want to hear my first record? It's like, no, it'll take you 3 to figure it out. Imagine you're for an artist today and someone says to you, you've got 5 records to figure it out. And you're like, wow, you mean like I have all those records, a long contract, everything's taken care of, I can create, I can fail. That's beautiful. Now, it's like, your first single better work.
Right.
And please tell me what your Facebook numbers are. Tell me what's happening on Instagram. Are you wearing the right stuff? Are you doing this right? But what about the music? It's interesting. This is a little bit of a sequitur, but I've always looked at it as the parents, the record company are like the parents. So they call you up and they say, hey, we'd like you to come see this band. So you say, okay, great. So tell me about the band. Well, you should know that there's 2 brothers in the band. Oh, that's awesome. So what kind of music do they make? Well, so the 2 brothers, one's 17 and one's 18. Oh yeah, great. And so now, what kind of band, what kind of music? Can you tell me about the music? So the 2 brothers have a 3rd brother. You're like, I can't get an answer out of them. So you go to the gig and you stand there and you go, well, I can stand with the record company people. They're all into everything I just described. Or I can stand with the grandparents, which is the publishing. They're all the way in the back of the room, and they know what matters is the song. And so they're the ones that the band goes to, or the artist goes to and says, I need to get a bus. And they go, okay, I'm going to give you $30,000 for the bus. You don't tell the parents. You don't tell the record company. I gave you this $30,000. Like the grandparents. Mm-hmm. It's exactly the same thing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they're the ones that are wise, because they understand that that's really what matters, not the green hair and the blue hair. Does that make sense?
It does. And you know what, just to add to that.
It's a little bit of a sequitur, but.
There was a couple of A&R guys I've really liked over the years that really got it and were really easy to work with and understood it and really were passionate about it. And they've all moved to publishing.
Because those are the real
guys.
Adult, smart people that know how it works.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
They don't care about the frills. They care really about what really, really matters.
Yeah.
And I really like that. And by the way, I love any great record executives when they're really great. They complete the team.
Yeah.
They come in and they hear things. You're like, okay, that really makes sense. Mm-hmm. And having been able to work with a lot of great ones and learning from them, I've always said is really great, including other producers and other people, because that means 20 people are mixing the record. Mm-hmm. I can think of things that producers or artists or people have said to me, no, you always should do it like this. Why? Oh, because so-and-so did it like this. You're like, oh, that's really cool way to do it. And now that is added, right, to your laundry list of things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like having someone tell you, Paul McCartney would play bass at the end. Well, why would he play bass after the record was done? Oh, because by the time they bounced it, you couldn't hear the bass. And you're like, well, actually, if I have the bass player play at the very end as well, right? He's going to play around the beat, the melody, the overdubs, everything, and he's going to segue all that in a way that he couldn't have done if he was just playing bass drums and guitar, let's say, if it was a basic thing. That's beautiful. I could talk about record making, the love of record making for 5 hours.
No, this is good. We've been doing it all day. It's been great.
Oh, but I love the record making thing. Once someone told me and I've used it over and over. Did someone tell me, or did I figure it out? I don't remember. But every time I record, if I'm doing a record production, I always, and I shouldn't say this, but I'll say it. I always have the artist. I always make an excuse. I say to the artist, I want to make sure the record feels right. They go, what do you mean? I go, well, suppose we wait to do the vocals, to have you sing it, after we've, kind of made the record. And I've had this happen, where you're going to say to me, I don't know what it is about the second verse, but I can't quite get in the rhythm. I think it might be a little bit slow. Ooh, wrong time to find out.
Yeah.
So I always say to him, just go out and sing it like 5 or 6 times. So we just have it. Half the time, that's the vocal.
Sure.
Because that's their most excitement. It just happened. Everyone's excited. Capture.
Yeah,
And there's so many things like that. That's 2 little examples, the bass and the vocal thing. And I can go on, we'll stop now. But of the art of record making, like the smart way of making of record, it's so much fun.
I like to always be singing. I feel like one of the things I noticed before I got into the engine, well, I always had home studios, but before I got full-time into engineering and then production, when I was playing in bands, I noticed that we would make albums and the vocals in a classic rock and roll way, 6-week album, which was like a standard thing, was like week to 10 days on drums, bass overdubs, guitars, keys, lead vocals was like maybe a week or less at the end of the record. And I always remember my singers, just the stress they were under after they've had 5 weeks of making this record. And they're suddenly right at the end expected to be, and just hope that week is their best voice.
Yeah, and how many times did they get a sore throat?
All the time. All the time.
Doesn't make sense to do it.
And we had 3 tracks left on the 24 track. Yeah. And we're trying to,
I've always, the smallest I think I've ever recorded before is 2-piece. Mm-hmm. And the only time I've ever done 2-piece is if I identify, as an example, the guitar player, for instance, for some reason, his right hand and the drummer's hi-hat, like the way they see the subdivisions in the bar line, just lock in a certain way. And too many other things can't get them to lock. Mm-hmm. So if the bass is playing, they may not lock, or any combination thereof. Right? I just pick guitar and drums. That's the only time I ever cut 2-piece. But generally, I like cutting it all, right? If I can, the vocal right away, because now they don't have to spend. And this I've never really understood, frankly, and I've never done it. This thing where you talk to bands and they're like, "Yeah, we did all the drums last week, and now we're doing the bass." I'm like, "Well, but how do you know that?" Mm-hmm. Like, I know you do rehearsal, pre-production, but like, suppose there's an accident and someone gets lost and they add 2 bars of nothing. And it's like, wait a second, that was great, a 2/4 bar there. Well, that wasn't the arrangement. I mean, there's no creativity that way. Yeah. I've never really understood that. I'm not chopping it. I'm just, me as a record maker, I can't understand how you do that. And I guess you've had success with that. But I can't make it work that way. I admire you for being able to do that. I can't do it that way.
I actually tend to prefer these days, the only reason why we do stuff in pieces when we have to is just because we're making it at my studio and we're not going to Sunset. But all the records...
So the environment's smaller, you're saying?
Yeah, environment's small. The biggest records I've ever worked on, the whole band was always out in the live room every single time. All the phrase stuff I did, the first 2 albums, all completely, everybody tracked. And then we just do overdubs or fixes.
Right, repairs.
Yep.
Yeah, I've had the most success that way.
Yep.
I wish I could do it the other way, but I just think it's like music by numbers, kind of.
Well, it's also difficult when we go back to the quote-unquote modern, is one of the problems is, or realities, problem is a big word. One of the realities is when you're track building, you're not allowing for that kind of push and pull between stuff. And then you get into a situation where you want to add real instruments and it kind of backs up against the wall because you've already got 90% of a track slamming all on beats.
Right.
And there is no way to get the drummer and the bass player to breathe and work together. It's like when we were talking about lunch, like how for me, I feel like when I listen to the Massive Attack and Portishead in that period, Tricky, they were able to do everything, and a lot of it was the technology. They were hitting play on a sampler. And so, I mean, even talking to Greg Gordon about Takes a Nation of Millions, all of that was played from a sampler. So when you hear that, somebody's actually playing it off the sampler. It's not like one bar, copy paste. Okay, what are we doing now? There was a guy in a studio, a real. It's not like a real. So it's not this interchangeable one bar all the same. The reason why we put that on, I got a letter from the government the other day, why it sounds so freaking powerful and still more angry and passionate than any modern version of that is because it was all performed Everything, every bar had something in it, not just the one bar. Again, it's like kind of a catch-22 because all of this is still available. All of these things can still be done, but done easier. So I don't think the problem is the technology. It's just how we choose to use the technology. It's easier to do things.
So you're coming full circle now back to your comment about that era where it all lined up, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and see, it lines up in hip hop and R&B and everything. It's not just rock. It's not country. It's not anything. But for me, it's just a metaphor. Because again, I don't want to sound superior like that was the good old days. Please, if I come across.
I'm not taking that, but I think.
No, I'm saying to the audience.
No, I'm not, but I think that's it's an interesting point that all that kind of hit at the same time. Technology had evolved and matured to a certain place, as well as the understanding of record making. Because keep in mind that when you talk about that era, that particular era you're talking about, we already had a lot of pop records, starting with the Beatles, so on and so forth. So there was an education of the idea of how a 3-minute and 40-second song was made, so to speak. And there was already hearing stories of experimentation. Well, the Beatles, they went and recorded in a closet. What? You're not supposed to record in a closet. Well, they did. Well, what are we going to do? Let's record on a rooftop. I'm making up whatever it was. Or let's record in a basement.
Sure.
And so there was enough time for all of that inspiration, and the technology evolved enough, and the world was exciting enough, so there was social commentary to write about. There were things to write about, because all this is reflective of society, right? I mean, all of it's reflective of society. When we talk about the laptop thing we were talking about earlier, well, that's kind of how things are done. Like in the corporate structure, for instance, and as I said, it's in society, people get let go. Okay, you've been here for 15 years. Time for you to go. But you're just kind of figuring it out. Yeah, I know, but you didn't just graduate from MIT and you don't know the difference between, writing in Idris or in C++ or in Python. Well, yeah, but isn't it kind of good that I know about those 3 different ways to write code? Yeah, but there's a new Python that's better than C++. So if it's that way in that world, it's the same in our world. In other words, the A&R executive now is a data. He's combing data online. So many hits, so many this makes sense. But I'm kind of segueing around, but we kind of did the same thing in the record company, because I remember Jimmy Iovine used to always say, when he was running Interscope, when we would want to sign artists, he'd always say to us, is there a line around the block? There's not a line around the block. You're not signing it. But you heard the demo, you thought it was really great. No line around the block? You're not signing it. Line around the block? Let's go. That's data mining. So why I bring that up is that everything we're talking about is always an evolution. So is there really a difference between the A&R guy now that's saying 25 million hits on YouTube, or the guy that stands outside the club on Sunset Boulevard and goes, 2 blocks, as far as I can see, they're lining up. Well, what is the difference? It's kind of the same thing.
Yep.
So everything just evolves. The way that we need to think about it, and we've been talking about this all day, right, is there is no perfect right or wrong. It's all exciting. It's all fun. It's all evolving. And the exciting thing is to be part of,
we just need to
the evolving.
Absolutely.
The innovation of it.
We also need to understand it, though, as well. Because one of the things that happened in the MySpace era was artists were getting signed. This is just a whole segue. Artists were getting signed off for being top 10. And a large proportion of those were buying the plays. They were figuring out how to game the system. And I think that it's having a greater understanding of everything and definitely putting all those pieces together. Like going, okay, well, I got 25 million plays on YouTube. What's the engagement? Why are people watching it? Are they watching it, for the girl in the bikini or this? I mean, for real, what is going on here? Let's understand the engagement.
You know what I find really tough about these kind of conversations and everything we've been talking about today and everything I see online is that it is impossible to speak in absolutes.
Absolutely.
I can say to you,
like
the sky is blue.
Yeah.
And you can be like, no, it's just outside, it's gray.
I love that Kubrick thing. Did you see the Kubrick documentary?
No.
It's absolutely amazing. I can't remember what it's called, but it's incredible. they're talking to an art director about working with him because he was so unbelievably controlling in everything he did. And the controlling is such a negative word, but it's not. He would research everything to death. I can't remember which part it was, but anyway, he was talking to the art director about how they came up with this particular scene. And he said to him, I need this to be blue. So the art director says, what kind of blue? He's like, Hawaii. I'm going to make up things, but this is this kind of detail. Hawaii, July the 23rd, about 10:40 to about 10:45 a.m., looking, southward, westward, or whatever. And the guy's like, okay. Because he was thinking about the blue he wanted. When he got the blue he wanted, he took the photograph, he made the note, he pinned it, he had the details. And so they said to the art director, said, what did that make you feel? Or something like that. And the art director said, it was the most frustrating experience. Working with him was like so frustrating. Best work I ever did.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and I love because I love what we're talking about here, but I know we're both saying the bigger picture. There's nothing wrong, and it's perfect evolution and where we are now. But one of the problems, like with all of this realities, not problems, one of the realities with all of this freedom is like we need the constraints that we can provide in our own mind of our creativity to generally do it. People say to me, and that's a good question for you. Somebody said to me the other day, asking me about producing a song. And I said I have when I was younger, but these days I never start recording a song unless in my mind I have a vision of how it should be. I'm not just start the tape rolling, let's keep putting overdubs down. Oh, that's another one, another guitar. Oh yeah, this is great. I need to have an idea of what it is. Even if it's just conceptually like a nod to Motown, this track and this track with a feel of this, and I want to bring in an edge of it. It needs to be something that I have a guttural feeling with. And obviously I need to vocalize it. The artists, we all have to be on board. Maybe it's their idea. I'm not trying to say it's mine, but I don't just start recording and put overdubs down and hope for the best. And I feel like sometimes the technology does the other thing. It says, no, don't worry about that. It seduces you. It's like, don't worry about that, Warren. You've got all those thousands of tracks and you can tune and time. Don't worry about it, Warren. Just do whatever you want, man. And that, for me, without judging anybody else, is some of my worst stuff.
I agree with that.
I'm seduced by it.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I've even take it one step further. I'm sure you have as well, but I've actually turned down things because I feel like I don't know what to do with this.
Great, yeah.
And they're like, no, but you understand this is the greatest. I know it's great, but I don't think I can take it over the finish line.
That's very admirable. I think that makes sense.
And by the way, some of those are going off to be hits.
Yeah, I can believe it.
And it's painful because I'm like, oh, I would love to have been able to have been a part of that success.
But how many great actors have you heard from? I see it all the time. Actors admit, yep, you know that role, it was one of the biggest roles ever? I was offered that. I turned it down. But they're usually also great actors.
Yeah, it's true.
Because they get to a level where in their ability, like you as a producer, you get to a level where you're good enough that you can make records. And if you know it isn't the right record for you, that's a smart decision, even though you might in the back of your mind go, yeah, but I can see it's going to be a massive hit. But if I'm not going to improve it and I'm not going to...
Well, it's irresponsible because it's not again, as we've said over and over, that's not responsible to the artist.
Right.
And everything that circulates around them. The live sound guy, the significant other. It's not fair. It's selfish. This is why I say the producer is the most selfless and the rarest breed.
Yeah.
Because that's responsible.
Mm-hmm. We talked about this earlier. I'm a big fan of John Leckie. He's made great records. And I think one of the things that solidified it was I was asked by The Fray, who I'd worked on 2 records with, who I would choose for them. And I said John Leckie, and they got hold of him, and he turned them down. And they were coming off 4 million and 2.5 million record sales.
Why did he turn them down? Did he say why?
He just said it wasn't for him, not something he wanted to do. Which is, it wasn't for the paycheck. They would have paid him whatever he asked, and it, even at a period of slowing down, it was a definite big royalty record.
So I'll respond to it.
Please.
That like this.
But I respected him more for it.
And I'm going to say it because I think it's okay to say it, hopefully. I had a huge hit with a band called the Verve Pipe on a song called Freshman. Big hit.
I remember, yes.
And so I was up to make the next record, which would have been their second record, I believe. Maybe the third. Don't recall now. And I heard the songs and I was like, these songs aren't ready. They're not right. So I'll never forget, I called Glenn Johns. I called Yoda. Glenn, here's the situation. Spell it out. He goes, well, you have 3 choices. I go, what? What do you mean? He goes, 1, you tell the artist, you don't got it. They're gonna yell, they're gonna scream, they're gonna tell you that you're wrong. You say you don't have it. 2, you say, you know what? You don't have it, but guess what? I'm gonna work with you because I want us to create together 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 records. So I don't think we have it, but I'm gonna go along for the ride. The whole ride, our whole career together. And we're gonna have ups and downs and mountains and valleys, and that's okay. And I think this is a valley, but believe me, I'm gonna act like it's a mountain. I'm gonna get behind it 100%. Or thirdly, right, you push them to greatness. So what do you mean by that? He said, Peter Townsend came into me with a cassette. And he said, this is going to be the greatest record ever. They had just come off of Pinball Wizard, which was beyond massive. Beyond massive. So that meant everyone thought The Who was great. Everyone told them how great they were. The wives, the girlfriends, the grips, the sound guys. Everybody was worshiping. Pops in the cassette, Glenn listens to it at Olympic Studios, and he goes, rubbish, in a British way. Rubbish. And Townsend's like, what do you mean rubbish? You're rubbish. He goes, get out. Peter looks at him like, don't you realize I'm Peter Townsend, pinball? Yeah, I know. This is not good enough. Get out. Acting. He knew exactly what he was doing. 2 weeks later, he came back. Who's next? There would have never been Who's Next if Glenn had said, okay, Pinball Wizard 2, no Who's Next. One of the greatest records Who ever made. So he said, that is your template. That's how you have to do it. Those are your 3 choices. I'll never forget that.
What did you go with?
I
knew I was going to ask.
I told them they weren't ready.
Yeah.
And if they wanted to work, and I actually told them the Who's Next story, and they wanted to go. I've had this happen 3 times. And then what happens is they ask other people, and then finally someone says yes. And then they fail. Because the song is the power.
That's what, I'm going to swear, that's what is known as co-signing the bullshit. You phone everybody up until somebody agrees with the opinion that you already have.
I had it with another band that I made 3 records with very successfully. And I can remember standing outside the gig and I said, someone will say yes. And that's exactly what happened. They went to 3 other producers, all said, Jack's right, they all said no. And then they went to the 5th guy and the guy said yes. They made the record, sold 2 records. Because the power's in the song. You know, people, as I said before, by the time you get to your 2nd, 3rd, and 4th record, you have less things. You know, you remember you had like 20 years to write your first set of songs.
Sure.
You don't have that. You know what I mean? And that also comes back to being a responsible record producer where you go, I need to hold some back. I'm going to take a chance that these guys are going to hire me again. So I'm going to hold these 2 back for the next record. That I know these are hits, but I'm not going to be selfish and put 5 on here. I'm going to hold 2 back for the next one.
Jack Douglas with Cheap Trick.
Is that what he does?
Mm-hmm. He did that with.
That's awesome.
He did that with Big Hits, because he wanted the first record to be edgy and dark, and he's like, it was like he said it on an interview with me. He said the first record was about drug addictions and pimps and all kinds of craziness, and he goes, they had the big hits. They had a Surrender and I Want You to Love. We had those songs. But because if I put them on that record, they would have come out and maybe they would have had a minor hit and that would have been the end of their career. It's the same thing. He said he wanted a dark, great, establish them as a proper rock and roll band before getting into the poppier hits. And they left them for 2 or 3 records.
So the question is this. That example you just gave, the example I just gave, and others, the Frey example, that's the 3rd one I can think of real quick. And there were a few others we said today to each other. Does that happen today?
I don't know. I think going back to
what you... And if it doesn't, does it matter and should it? And why is it not?
Well, going back to what you were saying about A&R guys, I don't know if it can. I think what's happening, I've noticed in modern rock, and it's just a recent-ish, well, it's happened 100 times over the years, but it recently happened the last 6 months, a year, is allow the artist to do the record they want to make, but make sure you have one hit. How do you do that? You do a cover. You do a reimagining. So I've noticed that happened in the late 90s with Limp Bizkit. They had the big hit with Faith, the George Michael cover. Marilyn Manson, Sweet Dreams. Who was the band? Oh, the Mrs. Robinson in the mid-90s.
That's a very good point.
So
that's a really good point.
That was, and they're doing that at the moment with modern rock bands. If you turn on like modern rock radio, you'll hear like, not all the time, but every now and then, like every 3 or 4 songs, with it, that's a cover. But it's a way to either A, establish a young band coming up, or to rejuvenate an older brand. I'm not going to say the obvious one, but there was a band recently that we both talked about off camera that have re-established themselves. They have a cult following, they're doing huge, but they recently did a cover and massive hit. And I think that there's ways to do it. And I think maybe that's not a bad way. Let the band make their record. If you believe in them, if they don't have the hit single, a cover's not a bad way to get them out there, as long as they have the goods for the second and third record of following it up. But,
I love doing covers. The covers are maybe my favorite thing to do because you know what the guidelines are. Like you can tell when you're making the record, like, oh, we went too far this way or that way because it's not the right feeling.
I noticed something when I walked in. The Ataris.
Ataris, yeah, 311's another one up there.
Yeah.
311 was that we did a cover of one of those great 80s records. And it was just fun because I know how far I can go before I go too far.
Yeah.
Right? So I have, you know what I mean? It's safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's another level of experimentation that's fun. Yeah. And I know I can't get screwed because I know what the feeling is of the record. Mm-hmm. And if I don't have the feeling, I failed. Yeah. But I know what the feeling is. Yeah. Because when you're making a new record, like when you were working with the Fray, you didn't have a template. Mm-hmm. You were making a template. You were actually creating what is the Fray? How does it sound? And you're experimenting and you find it. Okay, that's unlocking the code. I found it. And you kind of know the formula, sort of. But you have to find that formula. But with a cover, you know what the formula is. Mm-hmm. Here's how the guitar solo goes. This is how the verse goes, how the chorus goes. This is kind of the hooks that matter. Here are the cool couple sounds that remind you of the song that you have to have a certain synth sound, a certain guitar sound, a certain vocal sound, whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. But then you get to play with all the other stuff.
Sure.
That's kind of fun.
I think it's great. And look, the Beatles' first 3 albums all had covers.
That's right. You're exactly right. There is something to that.
I think there's something to it, and I think it's a good compromise. I'm sure lots of people will disagree, but I do think it's if it's the way that modern A&R guys, speaking using the word modern, contemporary, how about that? Use a new word. Contemporary A&R guys, if it's a way that they can help bands grow, but also help them achieve success, I don't think it's a bad thing. Plus, hey, there's nothing worse than introducing a band to an amazing song and seeing, oh, wow, A-game, this is a hit. We need to write songs like this. That's also not a bad thing as well.
I have to say that I've really enjoyed today. Because I feel like we've been able to just kind of bounce around, talk about different things. Some connect, some don't connect. Mm-hmm. But it's just talking, and not being so particular about, oh, it has to be like this, and this is how we used to do it. And it's just like learning. We're both in the same position. I feel like we're still learning. We've done all these records. We've had all this success, but we're still trying to figure it out. Just like I'm still trying to figure it out. This is my only fear, is again, waking up and going I know how it all works. Because we like to hunt and figure things out. Mm-hmm. And it's that constant thing of okay, I know I did it this way last time. What if I record it this way or produce it this way or mix it this way or make it this way or arrangement or write it this way or change the melody this way? It's a constant hunt of trying to find it. Even after you've had success. That's so much fun. And I feel like today I've been able to just talk to you and you've been able to share things with me and off and on camera. We're just talking.
No, I love it.
It's so much fun.
Yeah. Well, honestly, that means a lot. And, I've had some success, but I haven't had this kind of success that you've had. You're in that. I mean, there was a time when I remember Sandy Robertson sat me down, maybe 2000-ish, early 2000s. And I was still like playing in bands and stuff. And he wanted to test me. He was smart. He wanted to make sure that I wasn't, because he'd worked with this, I won't say who it is, he'd worked with this production team that were producing, and he was helping develop them and bringing in artists and stuff. And they were starting to get successful. And then one day they're like, okay, now we're going on the road. And he's like, whoa, I've just invested time and money into building you as producers, and you really just want to be rock stars. So I remember him testing me, so you still play? Oh yeah, I love playing it. It's fun, isn't it? And he started asking all these questions. And he goes, it's okay, you passed. I'll take you on as a client. And one of the things he said to me is he said, name the top 5 or 6 mixers in the world. And at that point, it was Chris, Tom, you. I think it was Brower because Coldplay had just come out, so it was about that time. Sermon wasn't around in those days, but I think Manny was just breaking. And maybe, I can't remember if he was breaking then or not. I
don't think he would have been.
Yeah, maybe it was Maserati. So there was like 5 or 6 of you. And he said, look at those names. And I said, yes. And let's add in like Serban in the next couple of years and Manny. And he goes, look at those names. There's nobody going to be added to that. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, the record industry is changing. He was very smart. He was predicting the future. He's like, this that you see around you, this stuff, this isn't going to happen again. This world it's a totally different world now. And this is like, I want to say 2001, 2002-ish, but he's right. He's right. There's that world. It's a whole different place now. Like you're saying, it's streaming. There's ways that people are making money, but the traditional, record comes out, sells 1 million copies in the first few weeks, goes on to maybe sell 2, 3, 4, 5 million. That world and that sort of echelon has kind of gone where we measure our success in those ways.
So I agree with that, and it's partly what propelled me to approach Waves and say, look, I want to make an artist plugin. Mm-hmm. And they said to me, what are you talking about?
Right.
We make plugins. I go, I know you make plugins, but if we consider the world changing, because I saw that in my mind, I thought, if we consider it's changing, there's going to be a point where the way records are made is very different. Mm-hmm. So I think it's going to be driven by artists in a different way than, it won't be like what you just said, this traditional, more producer, mixer, engineer guys, mm-hmm. right? So why don't I want to make a plugin where they look at it and it says sub. Well, everybody knows what sub, every musician knows what sub means. Magic, length, attitude. Not 50 hertz, does that mean you hit me 50 times? But things that they understand, right? That allow them to stay in that creative place. So I always imagined PRS guitar sitting like this. They have a Moog over here that grandmother found 2 weeks ago in a garage sale she bought for $10 and brought it to the son. Do you like it? And they got their Nord and their DAW, and they're making a record. They don't want to go through that trip of like, I want to add this plugin and go like this and go, now do I put the compressor before or after the equalizer? The wrong space. They're creating. I don't want them to go to that place. I want them to stay in that creative place. So what if they could pull a plug up that they could actually even change later? So maybe they started the song at 101 BPM and realized it should have been 110. Well, now the bass drum doesn't kind of work quite exactly right, but they can pull the plugin back up and go, okay, I'll gate it, change this, do that, boom, boom, boom. Okay, now it makes sense for that tempo, right? So it took me a while to talk him into it. And then I made the Signature Artist plugin, which came after the Puig and the PuigChild, only because I had to make those first, because I wanted to put those in my plugins as part of my chain. Mm-hmm. And then, as you know, then other guys started doing the same thing. Fast forward to today, I started 5 years ago. My next step was, okay, So we can spend all this time doing what we're doing. Someone's going to pick up their mobile phone, because mobile is at 79% of how people consume content. They're going to pick up their mobile phone and they're going to put it in a cup. So I'm going to spend all this time on the reverb, reflection. How many reflections? Okay, 10 milliseconds pre-delay as opposed to 25. Okay, add a little bit more damping, a little more top, and they're going to put it in a paper cup. That's going to do more change to any reverb setting I could ever think of to what that song sounds like, right? So I got involved in consumer electronics, and now in the last 5 years, a percentage of my time I'm spending with Google, Amazon, Facebook, SiriusXM, Motorola, the list goes on. And what I'm doing with all these companies is I'm now working all the devices. So Google Home, this right here is the prototype. I started this with them. I created this with them. On the floor over there that you can't see are the Facebook prototypes. Behind me is another set of the next generation of Facebook prototypes. Over there are the Pixel phones that I'm working on with Google. I start the Motorola phones in November, about 45, 50 days from now. And so what I'm doing is I'm working with all these different companies to make these devices better. We're not there yet because there's a lot of me convincing them that sound matters. Mm-hmm. And part of the way I'm convincing them is talking to them, like the example I gave earlier about the dogs and tone, and convincing them that, okay, look, battery life is long now. You can get on the plane and your tablet's gonna work or your phone's gonna work when you land in New York. It's light. It's got industrial design. We're on our way to OLED on phones. I mean, it's like, we've done all that. What about the sound? If we're made of 30 senses, and we only talk about 5 senses right now, though they're adding temperature this year, why would we not care about this one? Mm-hmm. Isn't this an input into the brain? Why are we not paying attention to the sound? Why is it that when I listen to music, it sounds like junk, or if I watch a movie, or even if I'm talking to somebody, I can't even hear him on the speakerphone? Why do we fix that? So I'm really in deep with Google on the Chromebooks, on the Pixel phones, so their laptops, everything, their tablets, same thing with Amazon, same thing with Facebook, all their Facebook devices, and the list goes on, all those different companies. And I'm really working now to do what I did with the plugins, which was a step in a different direction. I now want to do that with the consumer products because that's starting to change. And again, we pretty much consume most of our products on all these mobile devices. There are no such thing with big stereo. Now, the one thing I'm very excited about, last thing I'll say about this, that I'm really excited about, is I think the smart speaker, and please take this with a grain of salt, I think it's the return of the hi-fi to the home, kind of. If you stop and think about it, they're in a race to all sound better than the other one. They're trying to make them sound better, right? We all are. But the beauty is, it's kind of the return of the stereo to the home. Because if you ask people like, how do you listen to music? I don't know, on my phone or my laptop. You and I both know that that's not representative of what we create. Come on, just does it.
Oh, I've had mixed notes from a laptop before. Need some more low end on the kick. How are you listening? Through my laptop.
It's irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
So that's now a big part of my time I'm also spending is working with all those manufacturers to make it better for all of us. Just like I did with the plugins, for DJs and for newer record makers that aren't doing it the way that you'd explain to me about Sandy. Yeah. Okay, so the next step is, what about the end?
What I loved, just to pause you, what I loved about the plugins, and I wanted to mention them, but so thank you for going into all this other stuff. It's amazing. But what I love about what we're talking about with plugins, I've been talking about this a lot. I love vintage equipment. We all do. But I also think to myself, my son's 12, about to turn 13 in January. Why does a 13-year-old need to know what an 1176 is? As much as I love 1176s. If they're making music, can't they just have a device that does all of these different functions? Do we have to have a clone? I've found that recently there's quite a few companies, like microphone companies I like. And the couple of microphone companies I'm really digging don't make clones. They're not going, oh, this is our 67, this is our 47, this is our 251, this is our ribbon, blah, 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 this is our OC8.
They're just making their own thing.
They're just making microphones. Like microphones, like hear both sides of the capsule at the same time. And then you can change the polar pattern afterwards. So you can stick that over the top of the piano, you pull it up, it's the best stereo you've ever heard in your life because it's hearing both sides of the capsules. No phase polarity issues whatsoever. You know, that kind of thinking is just refreshing. And, you know, we're talking about, you know, how people coming up are trying to understand, you know, what we did in the past and where we see the disconnect. I think a lot of it is because we also are putting constraints on ourselves and therefore on them by saying they have to do it a certain way. If we bring products to them that get rid of that necessity, it's going to make everything better. If you just give them a microphone that's affordable, that sounds amazing, if you give them a plug-in that does all the functions they need without having to learn an unnecessary step just because we think that it's better.
Well, because that's how it was done.
That's how it was done, yeah.
Okay, that was then.
Yeah, that was
It's not done now this way.
Yeah.
You don't have the same needs.
Yeah.
We don't.
Yeah. I love LA2s. I love every single compressor ever made. I love it has different characteristics. But I think I'd rather have something that does that just has coloration controls on it, that emulates them in a way without really emulating them. Because I don't think a kid needs to know. They don't need to know. If they want to go back, it's not like music. It's not like I will tell people to work for me. I've given him a hard time in the past. It's like, who's Robert Johnson? You don't know who Robert Johnson is? Go and learn who Robert Johnson is. I think that's important. I think it's important because I think it gives you a sense of where the music comes from, and I think it actually enhances. But I don't know I could stand behind saying, do you know how to use an 1176? So I think your plugin is incredibly refreshing and very smart because it thinks exactly like we're talking about. Modern is the word we don't want to use, but it's like just thinking without the constraints. And yes, I do hope that something happens with the hi-fi stuff because what's happening at the moment is last year, I heard that headphone sales were up 20% from the year before. I just heard a few days ago, 40% from the year before. So headphone sales are going through the roof because that's the only way to listen to music properly.
That in the car.
Yeah, that in the car.
Car is kind of the last frontier.
Yeah.
Right? And that's about it. But with the way the world's moving into IoT, right?
Yeah.
It certainly will be where the home will be so smart that you will just walk through it.
Yeah.
Have a call. You're just talking to somebody. You go from one room to the next room, right? And so should the sound be that way, the output, as well as the input. That's the input. That's the microphone side. But the output side should be the same way, where it all sounds amazing. I mean, imagine if it could sound like that. Imagine if your phone was a case, a battery backup, and essentially what a good sounding Bluetooth speaker is on your phone. That is a studio in your pocket. That's what I'm building.
Amazing.
That's what you should be doing. That's the sound that we should be doing. So we could really enjoy what the records that we're making, that other people are making, actually be able to hear them. Actually be able to get the feeling of what the record is. Not high resolution, not 100, I don't care about 100K. The feeling. You know, I have a little demo over there. So it's got a Motorola, that's called a transistor radio. And the one in the middle is another transistor radio made by Sony, and the other one's an iPhone.
Yeah.
And I can show, this is what it sounded like on a Motorola years ago on a transistor radio, and here's what you're hearing today. And when you hear it go through from the 60s to the 70s to now, you're like, we went way backwards. Like, go back to transistor radio. That's much, I'd rather listen to that by far. I can show you before you leave. We have to get back there. This thing, how we're hearing stuff now, is garbage. And it should be people like us who know what the record's supposed to feel like. When I'm with Google and I'm working with them in Silicon Valley or any of these companies I'm talking about, I know what the record's supposed to feel like. I was there. I either made it or my friend made it, or I just know what it's supposed to be. I'm like, that's an imposter. That is not what the record sounds like. So it's a matter of manipulating massive compression, massive tools. It's what I call device mastering. So we grew up, we would go to the mastering guy, right? And he would master the record. Now there needs to be device mastering. Why are we not mastering devices? That's what I'm doing. So that's my next little Look, record making is my love. Nothing matters to me more than that. Mm-hmm. But we need to have a whole chain working. We do. When we grew up and our parents grew up, you had a big stereo system and you could sit and listen to it. It was beautiful sounding. Now what do you have? These little speakers in the corner mm-hmm. that have a bunch of mid-range and you can't really hear anything. If we harken back, low end was 200 hertz.
Exactly.
Low end now is, I'm gonna exaggerate, is 5 hertz, mm-hmm. if you could get it. And if you don't have the bottom being big, you don't have anything, because sometimes there's not even a bass on the record, right? It's the tuned 808. Well, if you can't hear that 808, there's no bass. Therefore, going back to what I said a long time ago, chords don't work, melody doesn't work, you don't got the record. So we can go in the cool studio that we go into. I've got these huge monitors back here, 3-way, massive subwoofers. I can bang it in here and make it sound amazing. That's great. That's just fine, Jack. Now what happens if someone listens to it on a Mac, mm-hmm. laptop? Now what? Oops.
Yep.
Not good.
We
need to change this.
I find there's a lot of modern rock records from late 90s through early 2000s, which I can't listen to in any modern way because they're so hyped in the high end. Literally on a phone, it sounds like and there's a vocal in the middle there. Unbearable. On a laptop, same thing. And I've noticed a lot of mixers now are just referencing all their mixers that way, just to get that high end. And I've seen more kind of sculptured high end than I've ever seen in mixers. You open up a mix and like everything is like completely controlled because it's the only way it will translate into a mobile environment.
And that's how people consume.
Yeah.
And they don't. And by the way, not because people are stupid. You can't go to the Apple store and say, give me an iPhone 25.6. They're like, we don't make a 25.6. Well, that's the one that sounds really, no, there's not a choice.
Yeah.
So we are accepting a substandard experience because we don't have an option.
Right.
Now, the one thing the smart speaker is doing is some of them have obviously more bass mm-hmm. than what people have been listening to. And people are starting to go like, oh, kind of like that. So my hope is we create a desire for something better. This is what I'm hoping for. And the manufacturers hear and listen, and we start to create something better. That's the next revolution I'm hoping for the consumer world in terms of technology. So that something of what we're doing. And what's really interesting is that when I talk about this a little bit with people in our business, it goes right over their head, they don't care. And I've been finding this fascinating. So the last year I started talking about it in our people, some artists, and just different people, record makers. That's cool. So have you heard the new book? They're not interested. They don't even want to talk about it. I'm like, guys, you don't understand. Mm-hmm. Like, no one's hearing what we're making. No one's getting the emotion. No one's getting the feeling. They're not. They're getting it mentally. Oh, I like that, mentally. But unless they get in the car or go to the gig that has a 25 subwoofers and the 1 million watts of power, which they may not have either one, they don't feel it. It's kind of sad. I want to change that.
Well, marvelous.
Anyway.
What a great way to end.
Thanks.
Mr. JJP, thank you ever so much.
My pleasure.
It was absolutely marvelous.
It's fun.
Please, as ever, you know the drill, leave a whole bunch of comments and questions below. And thank you ever so much for watching. There'll be more from JJP coming up soon, so watch out for those.
But don't say anything bad about me.